Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1101. We decided on this before. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. How did you find me out, bald monk? Lin Fan's soul was practically shaken into bits right now. Bloody hell, they came striking out of nowhere all of a sudden. If not for the sake that his strength was pretty sturdy by now, he might have just been scared to death by that alone. Amitabha, benefactor, your Buddha Lord has a pair of Buddha eyes. It's only natural that I can see through your hiding spot. The boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up indifferently. Bullshit, you must have played dirty. There was no way Lin Fan would believe in the bullshit spouted out by the boundless future Buddha Lord. Buddha eyes his A*S. Who the hell was he trying to trick? He must have done something dirty when he FCKED Lin Fan over the previous time and left something in that god mountain of his or something. Lin Fan must not have discovered it back then, that was all. Boundless, who is this mortal here? The bright voice of the radiant master god spread out. His power of radiance permeated the entire world, basking the entire heaven and earth in a shade of pure white. With two veteran powerful beings of the immortal king state striking out together, the force produced was naturally something extremely incredible. Even if it were Zheng Yangtian, he was definitely no match for the boundless future Buddha Lord, leave alone adding the other dude in the mix. There were different grades amongst the immortal kings as well. The boundless future Buddha Lord could be considered as one of the top-tiered ones, someone way stronger than most ordinary immortal kings. Right now, Lin Fan was frowning while wondering if it was time for him to start using his soap right now. However, he could not help but feel a sense of worry as well. If the soap did not work to FCK both these guys over, that was going to make him end up in a rather disadvantageous situation. The boundless future Buddha Lord could only sigh out gently, Radiant Master God, this person is nothing but a mere ant struggling in the wheels of fate within the endless mainland. If the Fate Master God were here, he might probably be interested. The Radiant Master God smirked out slightly. The Fate Master God swims in the rivers of fates and relishes in toying with the fates of living beings within the palms of his hands. When Lin Fan looked at these two fellas here, his mind started whirling furiously as well. What should he do right now? There was no way these two fellas were going to let him off that easily or anything. Leave. Lin Fan did not hesitate as he turned around and bolted right into the void with a furious speed. Right now, he truly knew that the strength of the master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland was not to be underestimated. This was especially the case for this radiant master god, to think that his strength would be even more formidable than Zheng Yangtian as well. Thinking about the 72 master gods that the boundless future Buddha Lord had mentioned, that probably meant that there were only 72 immortal king state beings in the Moon Shadow mainland. As for the endless mainland, there was at least 100 immortal king state beings. However, in contrast, given what Lin Fan was witnessing right now, the difference between their strengths was pretty significant. Based on what he had known so far, the boundless future Buddha Lord's strength was on par with the Radiant Master God. The only other person was that selfless demon ancestor. However, Lin Fan did not even know if the selfless demon ancestor was dead or alive at this very moment. If the former were the case, there was truly no immortal king who could stand shoulder to shoulder against this Radiant Master God then. This was something that could only be described as despairing. Benefactor, you will not be able to escape from this place. The boundless future Buddha Lord chuckled before slamming out his palm. A gigantic Buddha palm crushed down, blocking Lin Fan's path of escape ahead. Holy heavens! The Radiant Master God bellowed out, sending a power of radiance that penetrated through everything. A mighty holy heavens trapped Lin Fan within it. There was no chance for him to even run at all. This mother CKER is really giving no damn chances at all. Lin Fan felt his spirits freeze up. Gathering his aura and channeling it, thousands of mystic skills burst forth from him instantly. He hurled out a single punch after combining all of them, the amount of power contained within it being vast and formidable. This single punch contained every single mystic skill that Lin Fan had learned in his life, as well as his comprehension toward the heaven and earth. This could only be described as something that could cause gods and ghosts alike to cry out. As he spread out his fingers, multiple supreme-grade immortal weapons bolted out. Explode, explode, boom, they burst forth and slammed out right onto the holy heavens. With that, a tiny crevice of a crack appeared. Without thinking twice, Lin Fan bolted right inside. The strength of these two fellas had far exceeded his expectations. Right now, there was only a single thought on his mind, to lure both of them to some faraway place and use the soap there right away so that he could FCK these two guys to death completely. Pishu, come with me if you've got the guts. Lin Fan hollered out, starting his plan to create more seeds of hatred in them toward him. The boundless future Buddha Lord and Radiant Master God were not bothered by Lin Fan in the slightest bit. In their eyes, this was but an ant making its futile final struggles. With a single stride, 10,000 miles were crossed in a single breath. In the blink of an eye, both of them had appeared right before Lin Fan's face. Benefactor, if you can flip the palm of your Buddha Lord, I'll consider this your victory. The boundless future Buddha Lord said out softly, then flipped out a single palm that covered the entire sky as though he had just deployed some unparalleled mystic skill. With that, the entire sky turned sparkling golden. Everything in sight was but that palm of the boundless future Buddha Lord. You're trying to play with me like a monkey. At this moment, Lin Fan was enraged. Moving his fingers, he shouted, go on out, soap. Lin Fan did not want to think too much anymore. Since they wanted to play, he would play with them properly then. The Lin brand soap appeared right away. The boundless future Buddha Lord was taken aback as his eyes squinted in focus. When he caught sight of that white soap, he spread open his lotus and disappeared right away as though he had just recalled something. Pishu. In a flash, he was gone just like that. What? How could this? Lin Fan was stumped as though he had just seen a ghost. How in the world was this boundless future Buddha Lord so smart as to know to escape right away? Boundless, what is the meaning of this? The Radiant Master God was confused, not understanding what was going on exactly. N-O-V-L-B in .c ohm. Lin Fan was secretly hating in his heart. That motherfucking dog's tea, to think that he would know of your daddy's plan. He had only used that soap on the Kunlun God sect once before. Could the boundless future Buddha Lord have already been watching out for his tricks since that time? Otherwise, why else would he just dive right into the void without waiting the moment Lin Fan took out his white soap? It must be because the boundless future Buddha Lord knew of the might of this soap. That must be the case given that crazy hasty escape. Looking at everything before him, that solemn and dignified countenance of the Radiant Master God let off a suspicious shade on it. Why had the boundless future Buddha Lord disappeared just like that? Could he have spotted something or what? Looking at the Radiant Master God standing erect up in the void, Lin Fan gritted his teeth. Since he had already taken it out, how could he waste it? Radiant Master God, receive my move, Lin Fan shouted out. That white soap flew over to the hands of the Radiant Master God with an extremely weird trajectory. Stunned, the Radiant Master God caught the soap in his hand by reflex. What's this? The Radiant Master God felt nothing but bewilderment. All of a sudden, his hand slipped, and the soap dropped down in the void. The Radiant Master God found himself freezing up as he lowered his head slowly to look at that soap beneath his feet. Instantly, he found himself filled with a weird sensation. This was a soap that he had to pick up himself. Only, this angle he was in didn't seem all that right for him to do so. The Radiant Master God took a single step back before arching his back down while making sure to raise his bum high up gloriously. He then stretched out to grab the soap with his hand. Instantly, the entire world fell silent. It was as though time had come to a stop. Shocked, the Radiant Master God snapped to his senses right away. How could he be doing something as such? He's short of a second fiddle. Lin Fan knew of the effects of the soap. As long as one were to bend over and pick up the soap, they would definitely receive a ferocious attack from the back. Big Ancient Demon, I'm counting on you. With that, Lin Fan tossed the Big Ancient Demon out right away. When the Big Ancient Demon, who was in the midst of cultivating diligently, caught sight of this, he yelled out, Big Bro. We decided on this before. At this moment, how could Lin Fan be in the mood to haggle with the Big Ancient Demon? He directed the soap and had the Big Ancient Demon attracted toward it immediately. Boom! Suddenly, the Big Ancient Demon appeared behind the back of the Radiant Master God. Those muscular arms of his clapped left and right before he planted them firmly on both butt cheeks of the Radiant Master God. Thrust. Within the mind of the Radiant Master God, it was as though a thunderbolt had just slammed down. You. Chapter 1102 Fight with Everything. Chapter 1102 Fight with Everything. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. At the start, the Radiant Master God had not felt that there was anything inappropriate about this. After all, bending over to pick up something was only natural. There shouldn't have been anything wrong with it. But all of a sudden, he realized that the situation was not as he had thought of it to be. The heart of the Radiant Master God felt as though it was being pulled by some mysterious power right now, such that he had zero control over it. In his eyes, that soap in his hand was ever so wonderful right now. It was as though he would feel extremely uncomfortable if he did not pick it up. And at that very moment when he had bent over to pick up the soap, he could feel a sinister pair of eyes aiming right at his buttocks. However, by the time he had reacted to it, a pair of sinister hands had found their place on his butt cheeks. Damn it. Well, that was what the Radiant Master God had thought in his heart. However, the voice that was coming forth from his mouth was, "No." The big ancient demon was feeling extremely miserable in his heart right now. Ever since he had turned into a weapon spirit, he had never fought a proper battle even once, neither had he dueled properly with any truly powerful beings before. In his eyes, even if he had to fight with the strongest powerful being out there and end up with his death, he would definitely feel blissful. But right now, he felt that there was nothing left in life other than misery. If he wasn't poking others, he was getting poked by others. Bam! That rear attack, a scene that could not be described, blossomed in the eyes of everyone present. Two distinctly beautiful sounds smashed against one another. At that moment, Lin Fan felt his heart skip a beat. How damned bloody miserable was this? Without any hesitation, he took a single step forth and appeared right before the face of the Master God. Even though I can't get to subdue that damned bald monk, being able to FCK you over is still a pretty good deal. Lin Fan instantly knocked the Radiant Master God unconscious and kept the soap back into his storage. The big ancient demon, who was being controlled by the soap, snapped back to his senses at this moment as well. When he caught sight of everything before him, his entire face changed. How could I have done something as such? Looking at the state the big ancient demon was in right now, Lin Fan could only sigh out helplessly, "Forget it. You must already be used to it by now. I'll note it down as a big credit for you this time, alright." After retrieving the big ancient demon, Lin Fan did not hesitate as he stabbed the Radiant Master God to death instantly. This was the first Master God that Lin Fan was stabbing to death, and with that, his heart was naturally filled with excitement. Initially, Lin Fan was determined to FCK over at least two powerful beings with every single usage of the Lin brand soap. But, that boundless future Buddha Lord was simply way too devious. To think that he would have run off right away when Lin Fan deployed the soap. That left Lin Fan completely speechless. At the same time, it served as a reminder for Lin Fan. He was most probably not going to have a chance to make use of this treasure against the boundless future Buddha Lord anymore in the future. But right now, he could not help but admit that Master Gods were truly not called Master Gods for nothing. To think that he would require a good 6 stabs before dying. Ding! Congratulations on killing Radiant Master God. Ding! Experience points plus. Ding! Cultivation state leveled up. Cultivation state. Immortal King state. At that moment, Lin Fan yelled out in joy. Leveled up. He had finally leveled up. Killing this Radiant Master God had indeed raised his cultivation state all the way up to the Immortal King state. Pleasurable. This was simply way too pleasurable. Ding. Obtained Radiant Master God's Heart of Faith. Master God's Heart of Faith. A vessel used to accept the faith of followers. At the moment, faith is at max capacity. Lin Fan frowned out, somewhat disappointed. To think that he would obtain such a trash item. But, the fact that his cultivation state was that of an Immortal King state right now was the thing he was most excited about at the moment. But with that, Lin Fan was somewhat perplexed as well. He had already become an Immortal King. By right, he should be the most powerful out of all the Immortal Kings out there at this moment, which was a benefit that the system had always provided. But to Lin Fan's surprise, he discovered that even after turning into an Immortal King, his strength was still quite a bit weaker than the Radiant Master God. At the very best, he was only comparable to Zheng Yangtian. That was something that had him feeling rather disappointed. Infinite Buddhas. Suddenly, Lin Fan's heart skipped a beat. A shaft of Buddha light had suddenly bolted through the heaven and earth from the endless void. What? Lin Fan was surprised. To think that the boundless future Buddha Lord had yet to leave. And, to think that he would even dare try and sneak an attack on him at that moment. Bald monk, you had better bloody come out. Lin Fan retaliated with a palm slap, dispersing that golden light. Glorious light. Right when Lin Fan had turned around to return the attack, the void behind him trembled as a boundless war chi burst forth. Penetrated. No, vel, b, in .c, ohm. Even though Lin Fan had leveled up to the immortal king state, he still hadn't had time to raise his physical body state just yet. How could he possibly endure an attack as such? War Master God, you are truly formidable indeed. The boundless future Buddha Lord sighed out gently. Boom, all of a sudden, horns of war broke out in all directions of the void. Those sounds made it seem as though the entire place was filled with an endless strife. The entire void seemed as though different wars were breaking out in all sorts of places. Lin Fan spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. That strike from earlier on had penetrated his physical body. At the same time, there was a power of war that was corroding his body, as though it was hell-bent on destroying him from within. Alarmed, Lin Fan clenched down his teeth firmly before roaring out, causing all the immortal weapons to burst forth from his body. Explode. The both of you had better watch out. Bald monk, I'm definitely going to kill you. Without hesitating, Lin Fan dove right into the void. Trying to run. But, it's a pity that it's not going to happen. How could the boundless future Buddha Lord allow this lad to escape? If not for the fact that he had made a swift escape earlier on, he would have been FCKED to death just like the Radiant Master God. For the sake of his own safety, and to remove any unduly worries or troubles in the future, he had to take down this lad for real right here, and end it once and for all. Lin Fan turned around and found the boundless future Buddha Lord hot on his tails. At the same time, that War Master God was hot in pursuit as well. Even though Lin Fan could not make out his physical body, he was coiling over in a ball of war chi, tearing apart the void in his chase, without leaving Lin Fan with any way out at all. Come back. The boundless future Buddha Lord spread open his palms and covered the entire sky instantly. He did not want to give Lin Fan any chance at all. For him to sustain such a grave injury right after leveling to the immortal king state, Lin Fan was feeling extremely troubled. Lin Fan wouldn't be bothered about an injury as such in the slightest bit under normal circumstances. However, the issue was that the war chi of the War Master God was creating havoc right within his body, trying to break it down from within. Why isn't this sh*t something that would try to possess my heart and spirit instead? If that were the case, the system would automatically come forth and suppress it for me instead, and things wouldn't be as troublesome as right now. Lin Fan was displeased in his heart, but there was nothing he could do about this situation either. As he gathered his powers, his sword will sliced out everywhere. Flicking out his finger, Lin Fan controlled the sword will manually and slashed out at the void, causing it to cut out at that palm of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Bam! That Buddha palm broke down instantly, causing the entire void to quake. The boundless future Buddha Lord was alarmed. He had not expected that the strength of this lad right now would be much more formidable than back then. How could this be? How could you have already entered the immortal king state? The boundless future Buddha Lord exclaimed out in rage as he burst forth with a brilliant golden glow. Instantly, all the infinite worlds out in the void were filled with Buddhas. Since that's the case, then there's no way I'm going to let you escape from this place now. Boom! The Buddha voice was boundless as it enveloped Lin Fan entirely. War trample! The War Master God bellowed out, causing the entire void to collapse. Because of that force, Lin Fan was pushed out of the void. Not good. Lin Fan's heart clenched. Given this pressure right now, this was the first time that he had felt such danger in the current situation. No choice. Gotta fight with everything then. He gritted his teeth. As long as he were to get out of this alive, who in the world could confer death upon him in the future? Chapter 1103 4 Parts of the World. Chapter 1103, 4 Parts of the World. Translator. Lam_editor. Hitesh_November LBJNN. Benefactor, you have nowhere else to escape to. The heart of the boundless future Buddha Lord was rather alarmed right now. He had not expected that this lad would have turned this formidable. The fact that he could even hold out to such an extent was pretty incredible to begin with. His cultivation state had skyrocketed all of a sudden to the immortal king state. No way. There was no way this lad could be kept alive. No matter what, the boundless future Buddha Lord was bent on having him killed right here. The golden body of the Buddha Lord shone down upon the entire world. Amitabha. At that moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord was seated cross-legged on a lotus seat and muttering out his Buddhist chant. Instantly, his body burst forth with a brilliant beam of light as pairs of Buddha palms appeared out of his body. This thousand-armed Buddha Lord could control all the heavens of all the worlds out there. Every single hand had an utmost treasure of the Buddha clan floating above it. This was especially the case for the future gear that was circling around the body of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Each time it made a single turn, it made the present seem transient and having passed already, bringing forth a brand new future. If it were any ordinary powerful beings, they might have fallen under the might of this power of future by now. In Lin Fan's eyes, this boundless future Buddha Lord was even more horrifying than those master gods or whatnot. By now, the War Master God had already revealed himself as well, riding on 4 terrifying-looking exceptional horses. The eyes of those fine horses flashed out with a series of weird intangibles. Incineration, berserk, flames, horror. The 4 different types of auras infected the entire world. As for the War Master God, he was donning an entire set of armor and wielding a long spear in his hands. That berserk aura of his had already spread throughout the heaven and earth. In Lin Fan's eyes, he could see illusions of terrifying wars breaking out one another around the sides of the War Master God. It was a complete bloodbath that surged out with an endlessly wild battle intent. The 4 fine horses were spitting out auras, every single one of which felt like a heaven's might, as those 8 frightening eyes glared at Lin Fan with a death stare. It was as though all of them were bent on having him slain just with their looks. Eternal Axe. Lin Fan took out his eternal axe, causing a brilliant axe flash to shine down on the heaven and earth. However, facing off against these 2 powerful beings who were formidable beyond words, Lin Fan did not dare to let down his guard in the slightest bit. There was naturally no way he could make use of the soap right now. Since the boundless future Buddha Lord already knew about that trick of his, he would definitely take extra precaution to avoid falling for it. Assuming he were to take it out, the boundless future Buddha Lord would definitely vanish instantly like before. As for this War Master God, Lin Fan did not know if this fellow would dodge it or not. However, knowing the boundless future Buddha Lord, Lin Fan was sure that that guy was definitely not going to tell the War Master God all this. Perhaps, all he had wanted was to wait for both sides to suffer tragically so that he could reap in the rewards from both ends. Buddha World's Pure Land. The moment the boundless future Buddha Lord opened that golden mouth of his, the entire void took on a stark change, turning into a world of Buddhas. As for the boundless future Buddha Lord, he himself was just like the Lord amongst all the Buddhas right now, the ancestor of all Buddhas even, as he sat in the middle of them all while emitting a bedazzling radiance that was absolutely majestic to look at. Splitting Heaven's 3 stances. Lin Fan yelled out as the eternal axe burst forth with a formidable power, slashing out right at the boundless future Buddha Lord. There were initially 3 moves to the Splitting Heaven's 3 stances. However, they were all fused into a single move right now as that brilliant axe flash tore through the heaven and earth forcefully. Bam! The world of Buddhas quaked violently, and was on the brink of being destroyed. However, the boundless future Buddha Lord wasn't fazed in the slightest bit as he only spoke out gently, "Thousand arms suppression." With that, Buddhist sutras spread out and filled the entire world, causing the heaven and earth to be filled with nothing but Buddhist music. Lin Fan wanted to so badly to fight this guy all the way to the end. However, given the situation right now, there was no room for him to act brazenly at all. The War Master God stood there motionlessly. His eyes were like hawks that were locked onto Lin Fan. It was as though he was just waiting for this prey of his to slip up. Lin Fan knew that he definitely had to get out of this place. That wound on his chest was being affected by that war chi that was destroying his entire body. If he were to continue expending his energy with them as such, it would definitely cause a huge impact on him. The life force of the mythical parasol tree had been resisting the power of the war chi for a long time now, wanting to take it down, yet failing to do so completely for the entire time. Doomsday Descent. An everlasting destruction, Lin Fan roared out, throwing out a single punch along with a cleave of his axe. The boundless future Buddha Lord seemed as though he was just trying to delay Lin Fan. He could tell that the latter had not been engaging in any close combat with him the entire time. He should be guarding against the Lin brand soap right now. Stamp, stamp, a stampeding sound of horses trampling the ground sounded out. Lin Fan noticed that the War Master God had started going into a frenzy as the long spear in his hand brandished out into all directions before slashing down at him. Right now, Lin Fan was facing a tremendous amount of pressure. The might of 2 veteran immortal king powerful beings was not something that he could possibly deal with at the moment. If he were to make use of the Lin brand soap, there was a high chance that he could have this War Master God stay behind. However, the boundless future Buddha Lord was definitely going to make a run for it. And he'd definitely just be hiding out in the void, waiting to give Lin Fan that final lethal blow. Bloody FCK, FCK it. Lin Fan burst off into retreat right away to try and recover his wounds. He must definitely not drag things out with these 2 here. Master God's Heart of Faith. Lin Fan knew that this was something that could contain faith, and at the same time, was a necessary item for the Master Gods to raise their strength. However, Lin Fan wasn't someone of the Moon Shadow mainland, neither did he know about how those Master Gods refined and made use of this Heart of Faith. But, he knew of one other thing that this sh*t could do, self-destruct. The War Master God and the boundless future Buddha Lord were rushing even closer to Lin Fan when his eyes shone with a deranged expression. Bald monk, you had better FC King wait out. You're the first person I'm FC King planting my sights on. Lin Fan yelled out coldly before tossing out that Master God's Heart of Faith, rampant powers surging through it. Self-destruct. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of this item, he was shocked as he swerved back right away. As for the War Master God, he was equally stunned when he saw this, the radiant Master God's Heart of Faith. Bang! At that moment, the sacred and holy Heart of Faith self-destructed, causing a devastating force to ripple throughout the entire world, spreading across the heaven and earth. When the bright white light screen wrapped the entire world, it looked rather beautiful on the surface. However, the power possessed within was unusually horrifying. At this very moment, it seemed as though the concept of time itself was being cast out of the world. Boom! Everything in the radius of several million miles within the endless mainland started quaking out violently. There were countless of sects out there who had caught sight of this white burst of light that was emanating out from the far reaches of the world. It was then followed by a terrifying aura that rippled throughout the entire world. Everyone felt an immense fear in their hearts. They did not know what was happening, neither did they know of the sort of item that could bring forth a power as horrifying as such. At this moment, the figure of the boundless future Buddha Lord reappeared. Half of those 1,000 arms were severed, and his golden body was slightly damaged as well. His brows then furrowed as he let out a furious look. Future. The future gear started to churn out with a single creak. It seemed as though time itself was slipping away with that. Instantly, the 1,000 arms of the boundless future Buddha Lord were regenerated right away. Heck, even that damaged golden body of his had recovered. To think that he would have really gotten away. Right now, the boundless future Buddha Lord was burning with rage in his heart. He had not expected that that lad would be able to escape from the grasp of his hands. That was something truly unbelievable. The gaze of the War Master God narrowed down. The armor on his body was filled with cracks, causing him to look like a turtle's shell. However, these were not his concerns at all. What he was bothered about was the fall of the radiant Master God. To think that one of the 72 Master Gods of the Moon Shadow mainland would have fallen just like that. This was a tremendous impact for the entire Moon Shadow mainland. War Master God, that lad will definitely come to no good end. Now that the 72 Master Gods are arriving one after another, we can start the conquest of the endless mainland now. Boundless future Buddha Lord said. The War Master God did not reply, merely glaring at the boundless future Buddha Lord with a fierce gaze, as though the burning rage in his heart had yet to be extinguished. The boundless future Buddha Lord let out a benevolent look, unbothered with this attitude entirely. He then cast his sight out into the four directions of the world. The True Wisdom Sacred Grounds. The Southern Demons Ocean Region. The Hell Seas Blood Mountains. The Destitute Spirits Abyss. Amitabha. The boundless future Buddha Lord chanted out a Buddha Sutra as his eyes flashed with a sinister smirk. Chapter 1104 Rain. Chapter 1104, Rain. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. In a village somewhere, this was a place where mortals resided. On the surface of the ocean, the cool ocean breeze gusted gently as a figure lay there. Covered by seaweed from head to toe, he was just there to have the seawaters slap against his body as it wished. Wave after another. No one knew if this person had died. But, that figure moved all of a sudden. Slowly, he stood up from the beach. However, after taking a single step, he collapsed into a fall before picking himself up once more and heading over into the distance gradually. In the village, billows of smoke were spouting out of the chimneys of the houses there. Every single household was just that peaceful. At the entrance of the village, children were surrounding a strange person. It's the seaweed monster. Hurry up and hit the seaweed monster. He's walking toward us now. This group of children was holding on to tree branches that were only as thick as their thumbs. Creak. When those tree branches made contact with the figure, it was as though they were repelled away by some form of power as they snapped apart immediately. Seeing a situation as such, those children broke out into sad boo-hoos as they ran back into the village. They wanted to tell the adults that someone had bullied them. When the villagers rushed over to the entrance and caught sight of that strange figure, all of them froze up. They did not know what sort of a being this was, but he gave off a strange feeling. What are you? We're only an extremely normal village here. A bold and muscular young man gripped a tool tightly in his hands while asking out nervously. There was no reply. However, everyone could sense that this person before them was extremely dangerous. No one would dare to get on the wrong side of him. They knew that there were immortals in this world. They had once caught sight of immortals flying up in the sky above their village. However, it did not cross any of their minds that this could be an immortal. Thud! Suddenly, the villagers saw the person before them wobbling unsteadily before collapsing over onto the ground as though he had just died. A long time later, the villagers were still standing there without making any moves. It was as though they were waiting for something. Not knowing just who in the world this person before them was, all of them felt extremely afraid. At this moment, an elderly man clutching onto a walking stick wobbled over. He looked at that person draped in seaweed from head to toe and deliberated for a short while. All the surrounding villagers were waiting patiently, as though they were waiting for this elderly man to speak up. Carry him into the village. The elderly man croaked with a hoarse voice. All the young men in the village nodded their heads. They then approached the person carefully to have him carried into the village. Within a house, the villagers were surrounding the entire place outside. Some of them tiptoed while others snuck in secretly. Everyone just wanted to catch a sight of who this strange person really was, or what he was up to. Why would he just arrive at the village entrance, standing there for no reason before fainting over? When the doctor of the village caught sight of the situation of the body of this mysterious man, all of the curiously observing villagers heaved in a deep, cold breath. Terrifying. Some of the children were even shocked into tears. At the area of his chest was a deep wound that had penetrated all the way through. In fact, they could even make out that beating hard within his body. However, the mysterious thing was that there wasn't even a single drop of blood flowing out at all. Just what sort of a person is he? How could he still be alive after sustaining such a grave injury? The doctor from the village gasped out in astonishment. His chest wasn't the only place that was penetrated, there were signs of injuries on other parts of his body. Given such a grave injury, if it were any of them in the same situation, they would have long died. The elderly village chief turned around to the people outside and said, "Bring the children away first." Since the village chief had commanded, all the men in the village would naturally not defy his orders. They then brought their children away. "Just try your best," the elderly man told the doctor. The elderly doctor nodded his head. This was the first time he was coming across an injury as such. And even if he had seen something similar, none of them were like this man, whose heart was still beating and breath running. From time to time, the men in the village would go out and hunt for some beasts out in the wild. They too would get injured. If they had an injury as such, they would have died long ago. Soon, everyone dispersed from the area. The doctor was boiling some medicine and preparing to treat this mysterious man. It wasn't that the village chief had not considered the fact that someone like this might be a bad person. But, when he looked at the appearance of this man, he looked rather young in age, and didn't seem like a bad person at all. At the same time, they were all kind-hearted souls, and could not just sit by idly. Therefore, they could only try their best for him. A few days later, the doctor would come by thrice a day to check on the situation of this young man. He could not help but feel astonished over how strong of a life force this young man possessed. He had way too much tenacity and grit. And when he smeared some medicine over this person's wounds, they would dry up without any time. When they fed him porridge, they could even witness how the porridge dissipated out the moment it entered his body. This man was simply way too mystifying. The villagers had just been discussing about this mysterious man the entire time. The appearance of this mysterious young man had caused everyone in the village to feel extremely curious. They were even talking about him when they were out in the fields farming. Yet another few days later, on a path out in the fields, a young man stood there blankly as though he was despondent while looking at the villagers go about their farming. Seaweed. The children who were skipping all around the muddy fields surrounded this mysterious young man while chirping out cheerily. That was the name of the young man. No one in the village knew who this young man was, or what he was called. Therefore, they decided to just name him Seaweed then. The reason was that he was covered in seaweed from head to toe when the villagers first caught sight of him. At the start, all the men of the village were rather fearful toward this young man. But later on, they discovered that this young man didn't seem as though he could really speak. At the same time, he seemed rather dim-witted. Even if they shouted out at him, he would only turn around gently and look at them. Not only that, that look of his was completely lifeless, as though his soul had been sucked out of him. At the same time, that gaping wound at his chest was still ever so prominent. It would even emit some black smoke from time to time, looking extremely scary. Seaweed, why can't you speak at all? A small little girl wearing pink clothes and 2 pigtails on her head hopped around happily while looking up at Seaweed, seeming rather perplexed over this person. Seaweed doesn't know how to speak. He only knows how to sleep. Another child replied. Yet another few days went by. November LBJNN. By now, the villagers were long used to this young man. At the same time, they felt that this young man was extremely strange. That was because the young man would often head out to stand in the courtyard while raising his head to look up into the sky. Every single time he did that, he would continue standing all the way till nighttime, without feeling sleepy at all. In fact, he didn't even know how to eat. His mouth would only open up when someone brought food over to his mouth. That day, the village was conducting a ritual. Because this was the drought season, all of the plants in the fields were nearly dying now. Even though they could head out to other places to look for more sources of water, all of those places were dozens of miles away, which was really far for them. At the same time, the journey would be fraught with dangers. This was something that posed an extreme difficulty for the villagers. Somewhere not too far from the village, there were villagers kneeling down and bowing to pray to a sculpture that was made out of mud. Please bless us with wind and rain. 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 The young man stood there, taking everything that was happening into his eyes. Suddenly, his gaze flashed out with a glint for a brief moment before disappearing once more. That mouth of his that had never once taken the initiative to open on its own started moving out, as though he was being moved by the chants of the villagers. Rain. The moment his mouth opened, the entire sky started to howl with a gust. That initially scorching sky was covered by a dark cloud right away. There was no thunder, no warning signs, nothing. A downpour just descended upon them immediately. When the villagers caught sight of this, all of them were emotional. Rain is here, the rain is here. Chapter 1105 Instacle. Chapter 1105, Instacle. Translator, Lam_editor, Hitesh_. The young man stood in the rain and spread his arms wide-eagled, allowing the rain to pour down onto his body. Check it out, those trees seem to be growing stronger and larger. That small plant that had withered has suddenly revived. You guys, hurry and come over here. The crops in the fields have changed. Changed. An alarmed voice rang out from within the village. All of those villagers who were praying to the ritual rushed over immediately. They wanted to see just what in the world had happened. When they caught sight of the crops out in the fields, all of them were dumbstruck. Germinated. Grown. In fact, they were even bearing fruits already. Magical. This was truly way too magical. The young man stood there and closed his eyes gently. The rainwater seemed as though it was bringing over all the spirit chi of the heaven and earth with it and infusing it into his body as it flowed through. Within his body, a withered mythical tree started germinating with a small sprout after making contact with the rainwater. It was as though it was reviving right now. A few days later, the villagers were all busy with the crops in their fields right now. They had not expected that those crops would actually mature this quickly. It was all thanks to that mysterious rainwater. God's miracle. In the eyes of the villagers, this could be nothing more than a miracle of God. Seaweed, are you an immortal? My daddy told me that you're an immortal. That's because only immortals could remain alive after receiving such a grave injury. What the children loved to do was to play around with seaweed. Therefore, every single day when dawn broke out and the children woke up, they would rush over to look for seaweed the first thing in the morning. However, to their bewilderment, seaweed would just stand at the same spot every day with his head raised up into the skies. In fact, they had even discovered that the horrifying gaping wound on seaweed's chest was starting to turn smaller gradually. It was as though it could disappear at any moment now. Boom! Right then, a loud sound cracked out of the void like thunder. Guys, check it out. Immortals. The villagers pointed up into the void while shouting. At that moment, a few figures were streaking through the void. 3 men and 3 women. Their strengths were rather formidable. Senior brother, there's a village down below. One of the women sounded out as her gaze swept by the village casually. Thereafter, thinking about the situation behind them, she came to a stop. The leader was a senior brother whose expression was extremely grim right now. Let's go. We're not going to be able to save these mortals. Right now, we've got to inform the sect to prepare and leave right away. All those living beings have already started out with their campaign toward this area. They're going to mow their way over real soon. Senior brother Yi, you head back first. I'll go with junior sister to rescue these mortals away. We won't be long, a woman with a ponytail remarked calmly. Senior brother Yi did not consider too much about that. All right, hurry up. Make sure that you do not waste any time. They had been fighting out a tough battle with those living beings for many days now. The battle was an even fight. Those invading living beings that had arrived were simply way too many in numbers. At the same time, their methods were exceptionally sinister. Thankfully, they were still able to hold out. At the same time, one of the 9 major sects, the Heaven and Earth sect, had already started combining forces with some of the other major sects to form an alliance. Even though their sect wasn't all that large, they were still part of the main offensive force. Those invading living beings had already mowed down all the sects within a radius 10,000 miles from where they came. It was all thanks to the prompt information by the Heaven and Earth sect that some of the smaller sects could avoid being annihilated. However, even then, those invading living beings were pushing in at an extremely rapid speed. There was no doubt they would catch up really quickly. Junior sister Wah, let's go. ... The villagers were all shouting out right now, the immortals are coming. Some of the children lifted their heads as well. They were all entranced by the sight of those immortals descending down from the skies. Seaweed, hurry up and take a look. Those immortals are coming down. They're even fairies. When those 2 female disciples landed in the village, all the surrounding villagers nearby knelt down in respect right away to welcome the arrival of the immortals. The village chief was someone who was experienced in the ways of the world. Therefore, he too was naturally respectful toward these immortals. You guys, hurry up and leave with me. There's going to be danger approaching real soon. If we delay, it's all going to be too late. Hua Qingxian spoke out. Greetings to the fairy. All the villagers were kowtowing down in respect right now. The disciple of sects would normally not be bothered over mere mortals at all. However, Hua Qingxian was once a mortal in a village. She was then fancied by one of the sects and brought in. Now that she was looking at these mortals, she naturally felt a deep sense of reluctance. She would save as many of them as she could. Toward a situation as such, the elderly in the village were naturally extremely calm. If the immortals said that there was a danger, there was definitely danger. But, the young people in the village were flustered right away. They had been living in this village for their entire lives now. How could they leave it just like this? This was everything that they had in their lives right here. If they were to leave just like that, what should they do in the future? Junior sister, hurry up. The sect has already started to retreat out of the battle. The invading powerful beings are simply way too great in numbers. I'm afraid we might not be able to hold them off any longer. Another woman was looking up in the void at those streaking lights flashing by one after another. Her face was extremely grim right now. Things might truly get extremely dangerous later on. Hua Qingxian nodded her head. She then took out a lower-grade utmost treasure and said, all of you, hurry and get on it. Otherwise, everything is going to get destroyed later on. The elderly in the village directed everyone to board that lower-grade utmost treasure. Seaweed was looking at that blood-stained patch of heaven and earth far in the distance. Those lifeless eyes of his suddenly shone with a sign of life as he started marching out into the distant lands. When Hua Qingxian saw that all the villagers had boarded, she asked hurriedly, everyone has boarded, right? The villagers looked around at one another. Yes. Everyone is here. We're all here. At that moment, a small girl suddenly shouted, Seaweed is not here yet. Seaweed is over there. A small boy pointed over at the distance while saying. The villagers then started shouting, Seaweed. Hurry and come over. Boom. The borders of the skies were getting redder by the moment now. It was as though the danger was approaching them faster than ever at this moment. Junior sister, we don't have time anymore. Hurry up and leave. Hua Qingxian nodded her head firmly. Given a time like this, they couldn't possibly leave everyone here for the sake of a single person. No, we're taking Seaweed with us. The small girl leapt out of the treasure and sprinted out toward Seaweed. Wait for me, we'll go together. Another small boy jumped down. Senior sister, what should we do? Hua Qingxian asked in a fluster. That figure was already far out into the distance. On the other hand, those blazing red heavens were looming closer. I'll go fetch them. You leave first, the other woman replied. Pishu. The woman immediately chased after those people. Boom. The ground quaked as the thunderous sounds were approaching closer. Right at that moment within those endless void, a man draped in long robes wielded a magic wand up high while his body shone with a brilliant dazzle. Above his head was a hexagonal star that was ever so bedazzling. Within it, a patch of fire burned out as though there was a sea of flames incinerating it. The man yelled out, Forbidden curse, meteor storm. The hexagonal star started revolving, emitting a tremendous amount of power. At the same time, that it turned into a black hole as though there was some terrifying energy channeling within it. For the people of the Moon Shadow mainland, wizards were formidable beings that could mow over everything with their spells. One after another, gigantic meteors that were covered in flames burst forth from those hexagonal stars, covering the entire heaven and earth while crushing down on the world below. Leave. The woman arrived by the group of people and tugged at them to leave. But at this moment, the woman discovered in horror that there was a mysterious power emanating out of the body of this man before her. Instantly, that power enveloped her together with those children and brought them to the lower grade utmost treasure to board it immediately. Hua Qingshan looked at that man with her jaws wide agape. Seaweed. The children were shouting out. I've finally remembered. My name is Lin Fan, boundless future Buddha Lord. To think that that final self-destruction would have nearly blown yours truly's consciousness apart. If not for the mythical parasol tree's protection, I might have been FCKED over by you. Ha 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 ha. At that moment, he had finally recovered. Placing a single foot forward, he stamped down onto the ground, causing a tremendous amount of power to burst forth from him. The ground quaked out and cracked. Mountains and rivers collapsed apart. When Hua Qingshan and the others looked at that figure up ahead, their faces were filled with nothing but astonishment. Just who in the world was he? Lin Fan raised his head and looked at those descending meteors. He then pushed back against the heavens with a single palm strike. Suddenly, a gigantic palm appeared out between the heaven and earth. As he closed his palm with a gentle squeeze, that mighty wizard and his shining hexagonal star were shattered right away. Instacle. This was a complete instacle. Chapter 1106 Slay God. Chapter 1106, Slay God. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Hua Qingshan and the others were completely astounded. What in the world did they just witness? That young man who was in the village had merely stamped out with a single foot, yet the entire earth quaked and the heavens nearly collapsed. That single heavenly palm of his had devastated the entire world. This was utterly horrifying. Seaweed is so powerful. Daddy, look, that's Seaweed. Seaweed's hand has suddenly turned so enormous. All the children were cheering out while shouting excitedly. Everything they were witnessing right now was way too exhilarating for them. In their hearts, Seaweed was definitely an immortal. When the elderly village chief caught sight of this, his body shuddered momentarily to think that the day would come when their village would actually rescue an immortal. And at the same time, he was certain that this was the most powerful immortal ever. That was because those enemies that these fairies were running from were all taken down by a flip of Seaweed's palm. Just who in the world is he? Hua Qingshan muttered to herself in disbelief. To think that that figure would be that frightening. I don't know. The gigantic army of the Moon Shadow mainland was startled beyond words at this moment. To think that the great Lord of Magic would have been killed by the other party. That was something absolutely inconceivable in their minds. The might of the Lord of Magic was boundless as he brought forth the glory of the gods that shone down on the rest of the world, and was absolutely unrivaled. Even the powerful beings amongst these indigenous beings here should have no way to deal with the forbidden curses of the Lord of Magic. The gigantic stampede of the army up ahead covered the entire sky, their numbers frightening. Angels, dragons, undead spirits, etc. All sorts of mysterious beings from various races appeared between the heaven and earth. The might that was produced from their mere presence was absolutely horrifying. Just their numbers alone were the epitome of terror in itself. This was something that had everyone feeling shivers down their spines. Crackle. Bees. Standing there, the void around Lin Fan crackled out with lightning. It was as though he was the most horrifying existence out here in this world. All of you must be tired of living to actually dare tread on the place where I, Lin Fan, live. Tell me, other than your lives, what else do you guys even have to redeem yourselves for these heinous crimes? Lin Fan roared out, sending forth the absolute might of the heavenly dragon's music. Boom! Under that mighty soundwave, the entire ground started splitting apart. Even the abyssal lava that was boiling deep beneath ground was starting to bubble up furiously. Spreading open his arms, Lin Fan closed his eyes gently. It was as though he was feeling out for the heaven and earth right now. His eyes then jerked wide open all of a sudden. All of you can go and die. As he raised his arms, the abyssal lava from underground suddenly shot right up into the sky, blanketing over the entire gigantic army from the Moon Shadow mainland. The scorching hot abyssal lava was hot enough to burn all living beings in the world. Under the splash of this abyssal lava wave, there were many dead and countless severely injured beings from the Moon Shadow mainland. Tragic yells rang out one after another. Those living beings with a lower cultivation state could not endure the abyssal lava at all and were just burnt right to death. So horrifying. Hua Qingxian and the others were completely dumbfounded by now. Since when had they ever witnessed methods as such? Even their Grand Master might not be able to have such capabilities. But, if Lin Fan could only know what they were thinking, he would definitely burst out into laughter. Their Grand Master? Heck, in Lin Fan's eyes, that was merely an existence that could be wiped away with the swipe of his palm. Right now, the only beings that could remain alive after going through Lin Fan's hands were the Immortal King State beings. Anyone under the Immortal King State was nothing but an ant. Even if they were some supreme paragons and could cross through cultivation states to kill beings that were stronger than them, they would still be torn apart with a single palm of his. Suddenly, the void poured down with rain. This was no ordinary rain. Not only did it extinguish those abyssal lava flames right away, even those living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland that were scalded and burnt by the abyssal lava flames started to heal up because of it. After a while, they came off without sustaining a single scratch at all. N-O-V-E in .C Om. The glory of the Water Master God is with us. All of a sudden, a mesmerizing ode rang out from within the living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland. They were singing out in praise of an utmost and unparalleled Master God of sorts. Raising his head, Lin Fan looked up into the void, only to see a single azure blue river. Gentler than anything else could be, it flowed over slowly. Every single place it passed, all withered plants would start to blossom out radiantly once more as though they were granted yet another chance at life. The river flow converged before forming a woman that floated gently within the heaven and earth. This woman had a head of long, dark blue hair that floated gently with the winds. That peerlessly beautiful face of hers was one of its kind in this entire world. A single look was enough for all female species in the world to feel inferior in comparison to her. This was the epitome of beauty itself. It wouldn't be too much to describe her as the #1 beauty in the entire world. This was especially the case for that figure of hers, curvy at all the right places with a perfect arc. There might be no single man who could possibly peel their sights away from her at all. What a beauty! Even Lin Fan could not help but acknowledge the fact. When Hua Qingxian and the others caught sight of that bedazzling beauty, they unconsciously lowered their heads. These were people that were confident toward their own looks and features. But even then, they knew that the difference between them and her was far too great. This was a different class of being entirely. In front of this woman, all of them were but ugly ducklings. Indigenous being, why did you have to kill my people? The Water Master God spoke up. Her voice was as melodious like a beautiful tune itself, merely hearing it was an enjoyment. Lin Fan chuckled out. Beauties. He had seen one too many of them by now. Even though this beauty before him bore an exquisite aura of her own, Lin Fan was filled with nothing but pure excitement toward her. Killing the most beautiful woman of them all. That would probably be the most enjoyable thing to do ever. This was especially the case for someone with her nose so high up. Chopping her would be a work of peak-level art as well. If I've killed them, I've killed them. Do you have any issues with that? Lin Fan raised his eyes. Within his gaze was an unrivaled battle intent. He would never underestimate any opponent of his. Even though the strength of this Water Master God before him was unable to compare with that of the War Master God and boundless future Buddha Lord, she was still a powerful being of Immortal King State nevertheless. Looking at this indigenous being before her, the gaze of the Water Master God exuded off an authority as though she was merely looking at an ant. However, right at that moment, she had sensed the aura of the other party. He wasn't something to be belittled. Go on, continue pushing forward so that we can salvage those indigenous beings. The Water Master God commanded softly. She was going to take charge of the situation here. As for everything up ahead, she would just have her people continue pushing forth. Yes, Water Master God. For those living beings, Master Gods were unmatched beings whom they could do nothing but obey. Lin Fan scoffed out coldly, if you wish to walk away in front of yours truly, the only chance of that happening is when yours truly is dead. Spreading open his arms, Lin Fan looked as though he was hugging the entire world as he gathered a tremendous amount of power within his arms. The surrounding void seemed as though they were being pressured in as they began to shatter out bit by bit. The might of an immortal king was incomparable. There was no one who could stand in his path to kill someone he wanted to. This was especially the case right now for Lin Fan. After that battle with the War Master God and the boundless future Buddha Lord back then, his battle intent was peaking at this moment. His physical body state had even reached a pinnacle state, further beyond what he had reached in the past. At that moment, Lin Fan had not deployed any mystic skill, and was just using his raw powers to brutishly push everything. Right now, what he was deploying was a self-created stance that was the most powerful ever. Void hugging kill. Rar. Creak. As though they were unable to endure that berserk power that was emerging from Lin Fan right now, the void broke apart continuously as they continued to get pushed in. Lin Fan's arms expanded out rapidly as thick dragons of power dove right into the void. That initially spherical world suddenly seemed as though it was being compressed down completely by Lin Fan. All of you can go and die. That furious explosive voice boomed throughout the void. When he finally pulled his hands together, the entire heaven and earth seemed as though they had descended into a patch of complete darkness. Both sides of the void had been compressed by Lin Fan together. All of those living beings from the Moon Shadow mainland that had existed in between these two sides of the void found themselves crushed into nothing but mere dust. How dare you! The furious bellow of the Water Master God permeated through the heaven and earth. However, it was all too late by then. Lin Fan roared out in a tremendous laughter as he released his arms. The void, which was compressed down to a single layer that was as thick as a piece of paper, rebounded right away and returned to its original size. But by then, how could there be any living being be left in front of Lin Fan anymore? In fact, even those mountains and forests had disappeared. There was nothing but a vast, empty land in sight. Heck, even the clouds up in the skies had vanished entirely, leaving nothing but the pitch-black void. The notifications from the system for experience points rang out continuously, so Lin Fan muted it right away. All of those living beings were nothing but ants. No matter how many of them he killed, they would not be able to propel him to level up to the Heavenly Lord state. That was because the amount of experience points required was so vast that it wasn't something that could be achieved by merely killing ants. At that moment, Lin Fan raised his head up into the void and glared right at the Water Master God fixatedly. Today, yours truly is going to slay a god. Chapter 1107 Weak, way too weak. Chapter 1107, Weak, way too weak. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. By now, Hua Qingshan and the others were totally scared silly. In their eyes, everything that was happening right now seemed impossible. All of those invaders had an extremely formidable strength. Otherwise, there was no way they would be forced into retreating. At the same time, what they could not understand was how the invaders would be so numerous. This was especially the case for those skeletons, who would still continue to battle even if they were chopped down. In fact, within that gigantic army of theirs, Hua Qingshan and the others could even catch sight of disciples from the sects of the Endless Mainland. However, all of those disciples were like walking corpses that would strike out at them as well. Everything, every single thing, felt so darned befuddling, so darned chilling for them. But, what was she witnessing right now? This man before her was just hugging out with his arms in thin air as though he was grabbing the heaven and earth. And with that, the void had collapsed in straightaway, crushing those invaders into nothing but dust. A sight as such was something that had no precedence ever. It was absolutely horrifying. Just how strong should someone be in order to achieve something as such? Indigenous being, just who in the world are you? The Water Master God narrowed her eyes and looked at this indigenous being. She gave off a holy might that pushed out across the entire world, causing the place to seem as though it was a world of water. The only beings who could achieve an effect as such were powerful beings of the immortal king state. Being able to manipulate the laws of nature around them whimsically and taking control of everything single thing, that was an immortal king. Even though the type of cultivation that these invaders from the Moon Shadow mainland had was different from the Endless mainland, it didn't mean that they were weaker compared to the latter. In fact, when it came to certain mystic skills, they had things that were even more mystifying than the Endless mainland. Taking the necromancer for example, being able to manipulate corpses of people who were long dead, and even retaining the powers they had before they died was something absolutely unimaginable for the beings of the Endless mainland. Even though there were mystic skills of the Endless mainland that could create ghost puppets, they required countless treasures and whatnot in order to create even a single ghost puppet. There was no way they could achieve it as simply as the necromancers of the Moon Shadow mainland did, creating everything just by casually chanting out some incantations. Ha ha ha, Lin Fan roared out in laughter, you wish to know who I am? Fair enough. After you know, you can finally die in peace. Lin Fan's face focused up as he faced the void with a serious gaze. Hua Qingshan and the others waited with bated breaths as well. All of them wanted to know just who in the world this person was. The great name of yours truly is Lin Fan. You had better remember this. The person who is slaying you today is none other than the most incredible and outrageous existence in the Heaven and Earth sect. That boundless voice boomed out across the entire world. Those words bearing such arrogance in them filled the face of the Water Master God with a tremendous rage. She had not expected that there could be someone who would dare to act so audaciously before her. This was not only an insult at her, it was even a bloody humiliation towards her. As for Hua Qingshan and the others, they had frozen up completely. In their minds, the only thing whirling out were those words from before. Heaven and Earth Sect. Lin Fan, Hua Qingshan and her senior sister exchanged looks. Each of their eyes were filled with a look of utmost shock. They had all heard of this name before. And now that the other party was spouting it out of his mouth, that seemed absolutely unbelievable. It's him, Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth Sect. That the disciple that had the entire Kunlun God sect crushed down to nothing. Looking at that person before them, Hua Qingshan's eyes shone with a look of excitement. It was as though she was meeting with an idol right now. For all the disciples of the younger generation, Lin Fan's status was nothing short of an idol. And now that they were witnessing him in action before their very eyes, how could they not get emotional over it? Die. The Water Master God was incensed. As she lifted her finger, a water spout funneled up, gushing like the water from the heavenly oceans itself. Within those seawaters, a water elemental living being started howling out. Soon, more of them appeared one after another. Countless living beings of the water element stood erect up in the air. Their gigantic stature was enough to bring shivers in one's heart, causing one to tremble out at the mere sight of it. HMPH. Water elementals. Nothing but a bunch of trash. Lin Fan scoffed out coldly. Jerking his body slightly, a god of battle intent appeared and floated out behind his back. It then hurled a punch out, crushing down toward those water elementals. Boom! The entire world quaked violently as that punch was thrown out. The entire void was smashed so badly that a hole was torn right through it. As for those water elementals, they naturally disintegrated against the might of that single punch and turned into nothing but puddles of water. What a bunch of sh*t. Lin Fan remarked in disdain. Floating out gently in the void, the lips on that peerlessly exquisite face of the Water Master God curled into a toying smirk. Everything before her did not have her worrying in the slightest bit, this was nothing but the beginning. At that moment, Lin Fan raised his head and checked out the situation up in the void. Those water elementals that had disintegrated were gathering back and regrouping once more. This was something rather startling. Indigenous being, water elementals can never ever die. The Water Master God laughed out. She had utmost confidence toward her strength. She firmly believed that the only ending awaiting this indigenous being before her was to be slain by her. Lin Fan floated up into the void as well before smirking out gently, I'd advise you to show some capabilities while you still can. Otherwise, your outcome will definitely be extremely tragic. As for these water elementals, I'm just going to keep them for you then. With that, Lin Fan opened his mouth, watch how yours truly is going to swallow you guys. Breathing in toward the heaven and earth, there was nothing that Lin Fan could not devour. A tremendous suction force was generated in Lin Fan's mouth, seeming bent on sucking the entire heaven and earth right into his tummy. Gulp. A single mouthful was all it took for Lin Fan to suck in all of those water elementals as he broke out into a couple of burps. At the start, those water elementals had still wanted to resist and fight back within his body. However, they were suppressed almost instantaneously. Lin Fan chuckled out before turning over to look at the Water Master God. Seems like those sh*ts of yours don't really amount to much after all. Looking at everything before her, the eyes of the Water Master God shone with a look of bewilderment as though she could hardly believe it. How could this be? Lin Fan lowered his head as his lips curled into a grin. Moving his legs slightly, he burst forth with a tremendous might, it's about time for all of this to end now. Let yours truly show you some tender loving care then. The might of an immortal king was unleashed completely at this moment, releasing an amount of power that was unusually terrifying. Employing that power, Lin Fan threw out a single punch that tore the entire world asunder as the void started ripping out endlessly. Against this Water Master God, Lin Fan was not prepared to show any mercy at all. When she saw everything that was coming for her, the Water Master God broke out into a shudder. Lifting that fair, smooth finger of hers, a barrier of water appeared right before her face. Boom! That punch made contact. However, with a single cracking sound, that barrier broke apart without any chance of holding off Lin Fan's punch at all. Weak. Simply too weak. Lin Fan bellowed out, causing the entire void to distort in the might of his bellow. An immense force penetrated everything and collided with the body of the Water Master God. Bam! The expression on the face of the Water Master God took a stark change as she was sent flying to the ground at light speed just like a bullet. By now, Lin Fan had truly understood the things. Even though the might of that Water Master God was that of a mortal king state, she was still too weak at the end of the day. In fact, she was so weak that it was somewhat scary. Tell me, why are you so damn weak? Looking down below, Lin Fan shouted out in disdain. Boom! The ground collapsed in as the Water Master God burst out of the ruins. I, the Water Master God, have been promoted for 1,000 years now. To think that I would meet with an indigenous being such as yourself at this moment. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. Hue, promoted for 1,000 years. So, you're nothing more than a newly minted Master God. That explains a lot about why you're so weak then. Seems like killing you should just be as simple as slaughtering a mere chicken. Indigenous being, you had better shut up. The Water Master God glared at Lin Fan in a furious rage. She then burst forth with an unparalleled godly power, as though she was trying to sense out for some mysterious existence. The glory of the Master Gods. Boom! Instantly, Lin Fan could feel a mysterious power shooting over from somewhere distant. Indigenous being, you are strong. But, this should be where it all ends. The Water Master God spoke up. A shaft of light that shot over from the distance wrapped the Water Master God up in it entirely. By the time the light had dissipated, the expression on the face of the Water Master God changed. An armor that emitted off a godly power was equipped on her as an unparalleled godly might exuded out of her body at that moment. Compared to before, her strength had risen considerably. However, even if that were the case. So what? Chapter 1108 Whack with Violence. Chapter 1108 Whack with Violence. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Strength. This was the true strength of Master Gods. That peerlessly beautiful face of the Water Master God shone with a haughty and holy glow. Pointing out with a single finger, she shouted, "Indigenous being, do you see this? This is the might of a Master God." The Water Master God looked down at Lin Fan in disdain. That single point of her finger was just like a female empress who could determine the life and death of every single living beings out there. Hua Qingshan and the others could definitely sense the tremendous amount of power that was pouring out right now. Instantly, their hearts shuddered out from within. This was a power that they had never ever experienced for themselves before. Or perhaps, it would be accurate to call this the strongest and most horrifying power ever in the world. Even their Grand Master did not possess a strength of this level. Lin Fan looked up into the void at that Water Master God's arrogance. His brows knitted out as the powers within his body rumbled, his lips then slowly curled into a smile. It's really hard to find someone as arrogant as yourself these days. Since that's the case, I guess I will just have to let you experience the meaning of endless fear. Bam! The Water Master God was relishing in her own tremendous strength when she discovered a figure before her all of a sudden. That speed, her heart clenched up slightly. She was the Water Master God. But why was it that she was suddenly feeling the aura of this indigenous being before her undergoing a change at this moment? Hee. The Water Master God was stumped as she looked at this indigenous being that had appeared right before her face. Not only that, he was even revealing a bright smile. Those 2 rows of pearly whites that he was displaying right now seemed to be trying to brag about something. She wanted to bark out at this indigenous being before right now when a gigantic, heaven-encompassing fist suddenly appeared right before her very eyes all of a sudden. You, the Water Master God spoke up, startled. But all it took was that single split second for her to personally experience one of the most unbelievable things ever in this world. Bam! Lin Fan did not hesitate as he slammed that fist right onto the face of that Water Master God. That peerlessly perfect face was the recipient of this heavy, cruel, and devastating fist of Lin Fan, causing even that wonderfully flawless complexion of hers to suffer a vicious demolishing. Ah! A tragic shriek rang across the entire world. That was enough for Lin Fan to understand just how horrifying this single fist of his was when it landed down. Rearing his head up into the void, Lin Fan sighed out, when a woman is way too flawless, one might really find it hard to do anything untoward to her. But now, there's no need to worry about that any longer. Since your face is practically just like a pig's head at this moment and is so utterly hideous, what's there to hold back about? Receiving that single fist had the Water Master God feeling a stinging pain burning through her entire face. When she crawled up from the ground, she used those snow-white, silky smooth jade fingers of hers to caress her face. Suddenly, those sparkly eyes of hers flashed with a look of horror. Water Mirror Technique. A mirror appeared before the face of the Water Master God. When she caught sight of herself in the mirror, she screamed out in a high pitch. How could this be? Just how in the world could this be? My flawlessly perfect face. The Water Master God was frantic at this moment as she started throwing healing techniques one after another on her face. However, to her utmost horror, there didn't seem to be any signs of those wounds on her face recovering in the slightest bit. Right now, Lin Fan was up above looking at her just like a majestic emperor. Do you really think that your face can remain the same without changing after receiving the blood-bursting fist of the North Star from yours truly? That must be one hell of a dream you're having. You. The Water Master God glared at Lin Fan with immense hatred. Those initially sparkly eyes of hers were completely replaced by furious flames of rage at this moment. She could not wish for anything more than to rip Lin Fan into pieces ruthlessly. Looking at the sight of the Water Master God's face, Lin Fan even put on an act to shun his head away. Oh my, don't face me with that face of yours. It's way too hideous. I'm almost dying of fright from your ugliness. Hua Qingshan and the others were practically dropping their jaws wide open at this moment. They knew that Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect was a top-tiered powerful being who had taken down the entire Kunlun God sect. However, in the rumors that were spreading outside, everyone was also talking about how that same Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect was a man with an extremely crafty personality. He would often do things that most ordinary people would never ever dream of doing. Therefore, he was regarded by the masses as the number one person that nobody should ever dream of offending. Arghhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhh. The Water Master God had gone completely deranged right now. That face that was already destroyed by Lin Fan was looking menacing beyond anything else. Her deep blue hair spiked out like metal needles, exploding out in wrath. Damned indigenous being. All F***king have you dead. However, Lin Fan was just sniggering right now. Hee hee. You want me dead? You're far too much of a greenhorn for words like that. Pishu. A figure flashed out and appeared before the face of the Water Master God right away. That armor of yours is not too bad. Those two buns on your chest are pretty lumpy and huge as well. Let yours truly perform an operation on you then. Boobs bursting fist of the North Star. Bam! When those two punches were thrown out, the world could be considered to be torn asunder. As though they had just received some incredibly tremendous impact, that summoned armor actually started to crack out. And to the horror of the Water Master God, she was starting to discover some changes going on with her chest. What have you done to me? The Water Master God barked out. At this moment, Lin Fan could really feel that this Water Master God was way too weak. There was no way to compare her with the War Master God and the boundless future Buddha Lord. The difference between them was practically just like between the heaven and earth. Water Master God, you are simply way too weak. You'll know what's happening after 3 punches. Lin Fan's gaze was locked onto the chest of the Water Master God right now. Even though that chest of hers was perfect and full, it could not obtain the doting care of Lin Fan. On the other hand, it served to have Lin Fan realize how wonderful it would feel to destroy something that was so flawless. The second punch, that bursting power shot out, causing the entire void to tremble out in the face of this majestic might. It punched right through the body of the Water Master God, slamming down hard onto the ground with its aftershock. Right now, the Water Master God was nothing more than a punching bag that was there for Lin Fan to whack as he liked. Against his enemies, Lin Fan would never ever show any bit of mercy. Even if she were a peerlessly ravishing beauty, it would serve no purpose against him at all. The third punch. Go on and explode. Lin Fan burst out into laughter. Under that formidable blow, a tremendous amount of power erupted forth. At the end of the day, the boobs bursting fist of the North Star was still the most horrifying skill between the face of the world known to womankind. Bam! At that moment, an exploding sound boomed across the entire world. The Water Master God was truly frightened down to her very core at this moment. She had just realized that those pair of existences that she was the proudest of had suddenly decided to blow up. Ah, that shriek was filled with both horror and rage, coming from the bottom of her lungs and nearly tearing her throat apart. However, Lin Fan gave her no chance at all as he appeared before the face of the Water Master God instantly. Spreading his palms wide open, he grabbed out at the heaven and earth, seizing the Water Master God in his palms. 2 punches were hurled out directly onto her face, busting it up completely. It was the same for the blood-bursting fist of the North Star. After 3 punches, it was bound to explode. Bam! And as expected, her face blew up from the third punch, causing blood to spray out across the entire sky. Those tragic cries were relentless and endless. To think that the high and mighty Water Master God would be grabbed and whacked with such cruelty, without any chance to even fight back at all. After using a full combo set of his techniques, Lin Fan felt that this was the first time he was having such a wonderful sensation while going through a battle. Twisting heaven and earth. All of a sudden, the yin and the yang of the heaven and earth changed as an even more horrifying move had been used. This was the most terrifying skill out of everything that Lin Fan had in his arsenal. This was something that could destroy the balance of the world, cause ghosts and gods to weep, destroy life as all humanity knew it, and make one lose every single bit of will to live just by hearing about something like this. As though she had gone completely stupid from the shock, the body of the Water Master God was merely floating out gently in the void at this moment. Lin Fan gripped his fist tightly as his eyes shone with an extremely berserk and wild look. With that, he bolted out for the waist of the Water Master God. Bam! That deafening sound filled the entire world as a boundless power erupted right away from the middle of the void. Circles after circles of impact rippled out and spread into the distance with the body of the Water Master God as the center. Just like a bomb, she was sent bolting down from the skies, digging an extremely deep trench deep into the ground. Chapter 1109 Indifferent Toward Life and Death. Chapter 1109 Indifferent Toward Life and Death. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. That set of combo attacks blinded the eyes of everyone present with its brilliance. Hua Qingshan and the others had a stuffy feeling in their chest, as though there was something stuck in there. This was the first time they had seen Lin Fan in action. Regarding the affairs of the Kunlun God sect, those were only hearsays from other people. But now that they were witnessing him at work personally, they were totally frightened by it. So ruthless. In their eyes, this Water Master God before them was a perfect work of art. She could be described as the most beautiful and ravishing woman out in the entire universe. But to him, none of that mattered at all as he just struck out at her without mercy. That was absolutely way too terrifying. At that moment, Hua Qingshan suddenly felt that she was extremely lucky. She was thankful that she wasn't an enemy of someone like that. If they were to become foes, she would definitely have to endure an extremely horrible outcome as well. Landing on the ground, Lin Fan took a step forward and bent over his body to look down into that deep pit. While smirking out, he asked, "How about now? What are your thoughts about everything? Are you feeling extremely indignant about being beaten down by an indigenous being?" Swoosh! A hand extended out of the pit and grabbed hold of Lin Fan's ankles. There was a weak and feeble sound coming out from within, seeming as though she could die at any moment now. At the same time, there was a glistening hexagonal crystal core that glowed like flowing waters being propped up slowly by the other palm of hers. "I'm willing to bow down in defeat. Please don't kill me." At this moment, that same weak and feeble voice of the Water Master God trawled out from the deep pit. Begging, fear, horror. The Water Master God had not thought that there could be an indigenous being on this endless mainland that could be this strong. He was so formidable that her heart was filled with fear even as a Master God. The only way she could preserve her life was by bowing down in defeat. At that moment, she was ready to submit down unconditionally. The only thing she wanted to save was her life. "You're putting me in a really tough spot here." Lin Fan chuckled out, "Aren't all of you Master Gods high and mighty? Aren't you all filled with a holy authority? Why are you so darned fragile and weak?" The voice of the Water Master God trawled out once more, "I'm begging you. Please spare my life. I'm willing to be your slave. No matter what you ask of me, I will definitely be willing to do it." Highs. Lin Fan sighed out, "If you had spoken to me like this from the very beginning, I might have given it a thought of consideration. But, it's a pity, it's far too late for that now." Lin Fan stood upright. That disdainful gaze of his was shining with an unparalleled killing intent. November LBJNN. "My apologies. You're no longer qualified to do so." Lin Fan stomped down on that hexagonal crystal core. With a single cracking sound, that hexagonal crystal core shattered as the power of the Master Gods held within it gushed out. It was like the most beautiful rainbow in the world that was scattered out into the skies. "Ah!" The Water Master God screamed out, "Indigenous being. There will definitely be someone to avenge me. The only path awaiting you is death. Big sister, save me." "I couldn't ask for more." Lin Fan chuckled out. Finally, he had done in yet another one of those Master Gods. This feeling was simply way too awesome. Ding! Congratulations on killing Water Master God. Ding! Experience points plus. Hearing the notifications that rang out from the system, Lin Fan's lips curled into a grin. Earlier on, the Radiant Master God had already been FCKED over to death by him. And now, he had FCKED over this Water Master God. He heard that there were only 72 Master Gods in the Moon Shadow mainland. As long as he were to slay all of them, everything would come to an end. Ha 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 ha. Lin Fan raised his head and roared out in laughter. Seaweed, bravo. In the distance, all the children were cheering out happily. However, all of those adults covered their mouths instantly. This was the most powerful immortal out there. How could they call still him Seaweed? If the immortal were to get angry, that was definitely going to be outrageously scary. Lin Fan looked over at those children. "Kids, you guys have good taste. After you guys grow up, you can come and follow me." How could those children know what Lin Fan meant by that? But, the relatives of those children were stunned. This was a happy occasion that had just descended down on them from the heavens, causing them to collapse to the ground on their knees to thank the immortal. Hua Qingshan and the others looked at Lin Fan politely, not daring to show the slightest bit of disrespect. In their eyes, this was the most horrifying existence ever. If anyone were to ruffle his feathers, they would die for sure, just like that gorgeously beautiful woman from earlier on. The person before them was ruthless in his methods. He would not even care about whether the other party was some flawlessly unrivaled beauty. As long as someone were to offend him, he would chop them to death all the same, without the slightest bit of mercy. Lin Fan had no interest in Hua Qingshan and the others. He then grabbed all of them together in a bunch and fetched them all over to the Heaven and Earth sect. To think that a single battle with the War Master God and the boundless future Buddha Lord would have turned him into a brain-dead moron. That was something that Lin Fan truly felt helpless toward. However, all of those things didn't matter anymore. Now that he had recovered, his personal strength had even grown by a considerable amount. For one to level up to the Heavenly Lord from an immortal king, this was not an easy path to undertake. That was the feeling that Lin Fan's sixth sense was telling him. Even though he was someone in possession of a system, wanting to level up to that utmost state of being a Heavenly Lord was still something far from simple. However, none of that mattered right now. No matter how many of the enemies came, he would have them all killed. Even if he knew that he couldn't win against them in a fight, he would still have to fight. After all, the time spent living had him indifferent toward life and death. If he weren't happy about anything, he might as well FCK them up then. That was Lin Fan's principle of doing things. No matter who it was, as long as they were to offend him, he would chop all of them to death all the same, without showing the slightest bit of mercy. Bringing everyone with him into the void, Lin Fan rushed back toward the Heaven and Earth sect. Moon Shadow Mainland, a frosty city stood upright in the midst of a fluttering snowstorm. There was a beautiful little bird that was spreading its wings out and soaring into the skies. However, when it approached that frosty city, it was frozen into an ice cube before dropping heavily onto the ground. Outside that city were frost dragons flying around one after another. Circling high up in the sky, those humongous bodies of theirs were absolutely fear-inducing. Frost Master God, for the expedition to conquer the endless mainland this time around, there have been 71 out of 72 Master Gods who had agreed to it already. You are the only one left. Are you really thinking of just staying here forever? The Flame Master God floated out gently within the void. When the frosty air from the surroundings crept close to him, it was evaporated into steam instantly. This place as yours is truly way too chilly. I really dislike it here. A white-haired woman was seated on a throne made up of crystallized water as she rubbed her chin and looked over at the Flame Master God. She then replied with a frosty expression, "Is it a war? I don't really like that. What I prefer is to collect all these beautiful ice sculptures. Look at them, don't you think that they are gorgeous?" Within every single corner of this frosty city stood a series of ice sculptures. There were all sorts of living beings that were in different poses. However, they were frozen here in ice for all eternity, retaining the states from their lives permanently. The brows of the Flame Master God furrowed. The one thing he disliked the most was having to exchange talks with this Frost Master God. And that was because this woman was a twisted being, a completely twisted sicko, through and through. While the other Master Gods preferred enslaving living beings, she liked collecting all the different poses and expressions of those living beings even more, to have them encapsulated in ice sculptures forever. They were displayed all around the entire Frost City just like art pieces. My younger sister, the Water Master God, has already joined the war this time around. What need is there for me anymore? Flame Master God, you promised me the other time that you were going to give me a gift of a flame spirit's ice sculpture. I wonder when you will send that over to me. I'm really itching to get my hands on it now. The Frost Master God chuckled out coldly. Her face was the exact same as that of the Water Master God, the only difference between them was in their dispositions. She was frosty beyond anything else, as though she could repel everyone thousands of miles away from her. Those pupils of hers were like snowflakes that emitted off an icy aura. Flame and frost will never be able to coexist. There is no way that ice sculpture can ever be created. The Flame Master God said. Hearing that, the Frost Master God chuckled out, "Oh, they can definitely coexist." The Flame Master God raised his finger slightly as a flame spirit danced out gently within the void. Frost Master God, you did not used to be like this in the past. Could it be that after heading over to that mainland with the Lord of Chaos in the past, you have grown afraid? The Flame Master God mumbled out to himself. As for the Frost Master God, she merely extended her hand out and tapped it gently on that flame spirit that was fighting to resist the frosty cold of the area right now. With a single cracking sound, the flame spirit froze up immediately and turned into an ice sculpture. When the Flame Master God caught sight of this, his heart skipped a beat. He could never see through this Frost Master God ever. But, to think that she would be able to fuse flame and frost this easily right now and turn it into an ice sculpture. That move alone had the Flame Master God fearful of her thoroughly. In fact, he even had a feeling that if the Frost Master God were to strike at him, he might not even be a match for her. The Frost Master God took the ice sculpture in her hands. This is truly a magnificent piece of art. Within the ice sculpture, the flames on the body of that flame spirit were still dancing around. However, that flame spirit would never be able to wake up from this peaceful slumber ever again, it was already dead. At that moment, a voice traveled out of the void. "Big sister, save me." When the Flame Master God heard that voice, his entire face changed. That's the voice of the Water Master God. Could she have? Crack. The Frost Master God was stunned for a moment as the ice sculpture of the flame spirit in her hands shattered apart right away. A horrifying aura exuded from her, shrouding the entire Frost City in a patch of iciness. Knitting his brows, the Flame Master God vanished from the void entirely to leave this place. He knew that the Frost Master God was going to enter the phrase now. Chapter 1110 Truth Immortal King. Chapter 1110, Truth Immortal King. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Heaven and Earth Sect. After letting them down, Lin Fan rushed right over to the deepest parts of the sect. Right now, the Heaven and Earth Sect was in a hectic mess from head to toe. It was as though all of them were busy preparing for war. This was something that none of them had ever encountered ever since they had entered the sect. In the deepest area of the sect. Where have you been to the entire time? Right now, Zheng Yangtian was totally overwrought with chores. Out of the 9 major sects, the Good and Evil Buddha sect had actually colluded with the side of the Moon Shadow mainland. 9 sects, 6 residences, 3 holes, and 72 gangs. Even though those 72 gangs were in no way comparable to major sects like the Heaven and Earth sect, they were still a rather formidable force. But, who would have thought that half of that potent force was already slain by the Good and Evil Buddha sect? Not only that, everything was but the work of a single person, the boundless future Buddha Lord. In the hands of the boundless future Buddha Lord, the 72 gangs had no chance at all, and were just mowed down by him with a completely overwhelming brute force. This was quite the considerable loss for the side of the Endless Mainland. It's a long story. I had met some trouble. But, what's the situation with the Endless Mainland right now? On the way back, I passed by the ruins of many sects out there. Has it really gotten to an irrevocable state? Lin Fan did not know just how the situation had developed entirely. However, he could guess that it shouldn't be anything normal. Out of the 9 sects, the Good and Evil Buddha sect is colluding with the side of the Moon Shadow sect. Because of that, half of the 72 gangs had been destroyed. For now, the situation can be considered as being somewhat stabilized. We immortal kings have stood out and laid down a line of defense, rendering the people of the Moon Shadow mainland incapable of infiltrating us for now. However, in my personal opinion, things aren't looking all that optimistic just yet. There's no avoiding the huge war that's going to break out. At this moment, 1/4 of the Endless Mainland's territory has already been occupied by the Moon Shadow mainland. At the same time, some of those small sects have either been destroyed or have defected and bowed down to the might of the Moon Shadow mainland. Things are truly not optimistic at all. Zheng Yangtian explained. To think that it would be this serious. Lin Fan's brows furrowed, not expecting that things would have come down to such a state. At that moment, Han Juntian appeared. This is not all there is. The cultivation system of those people from the Moon Shadow mainland is entirely different from what we have here. The most horrifying amongst them are those necromancers, who can manipulate and control the dead corpses. As long as a single disciple of the Endless Mainland is lost, that just means that the Moon Shadow mainland gains an additional bit of power. Grand Master, have you recovered? Catching sight of Han Juntian, Lin Fan let out a smile. Yes, my Immortal King state has already stabilized. You must work hard as well so that you can enter the Immortal King state as soon as possible. That is the only way that you can have the capabilities of protecting yourself in this upcoming war. Lin Fan chuckled out as his heart skipped with joy. But, he decided not to tell them just yet. When there was a chance, he'd give them a huge, huge surprise. Sweeping his robes, Zheng Yangtian produced an image up in the void. Some time ago, I was engaged in a furious duel with some of the master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland. The powers of those master gods are not to be underestimated. Even though their cultivation states are similar to our immortal kings, there's a number of them who possess a strength that's even stronger than our immortal kings. They are equivalent to our veteran immortal kings, the same level as me. While there are many immortal kings in the endless mainland compared to the moon shadow mainland, the difference in strength is still pretty apparent. The situation has even worsened with the boundless future Buddha Lord joining their side right now. That puts our endless mainland in a really bad state. I believe that the endless mainland should have ancient immortal kings, right? Lin Fan asked. The endless mainland was such a huge place, vast like the endless oceans. There was absolutely no way there weren't any top powerful beings out there. Yes, based on what I know, there's an ancient immortal king that resides in the truth sacred grounds, someone who tops every single ranking amongst all the immortal kings of the entire endless mainland. His cultivation state is absolutely groundbreaking and incredible to even imagine. Back when I had just joined the Heaven and Earth sect, he was already an immortal king. Zheng Yangtian wasn't worried, because he knew that there were also existences that could compare with the boundless future Buddha Lord in the endless mainland. Now that the endless mainland was on the brink of such danger, there was no way they would just sit by idly and watch. In my opinion, the situation right now calls for us to preserve our strength first. Even though those minor and small sects may not be able to help out too much, we must not shut our eyes to those that are dying. If we were to let those of the moon shadow mainland mow everyone over, those disciples would be turned into undead spirits by those necromancers. By then, that would pose yet another problem for us. Lin Fan said. Zheng Yangtian nodded his head. Indeed, I've already had some of my junior brothers go and seek out those minor sects. We can only hope that we can manage to preserve their legacies. What is the Kunlun God sect's response to this? Lin Fan asked. Slightly taken aback, Zheng Yangtian chuckled soon after. Even though White Saint was infuriated in his heart, he isn't someone who is incapable of recognizing the big picture. He too knows that what the endless mainland is facing right now is a grave danger. I've already spoken to him. For this period of time, we're going to let go of every single grudge and hatred we have and stand together to push back the enemies. Once everything is settled and done with, we'll then slowly deal with our own issues. Upon hearing those words, Lin Fan was somewhat surprised, feeling it to be inconceivable. To think that White Saint of the Kunlun God sect would be someone who was so understanding toward the situation. That was a truly startling fact. With that, Lin Fan could not help but feel that this White Saint was a rather decent old man. That's good then. Given the current situation, I'm afraid I may not be of much help as well. For all the stuff about gathering troops and building up defensive formations, I still have to depend on you guys. The most I can possibly do is just to raise my strength as much as possible. Lin Fan said. Even though his current strength was that of an immortal king right now, compared to those people like the boundless future Buddha Lord and whatnot, there was still that much of a difference. If he wanted to raise his strength, he would have to do so by rapidly filling up the experience points required for him to level up from the immortal king state to the heavenly lord state. No matter the eventual outcome of how things would turn out by then, that was someone that Lin Fan would only know once he was there. Zheng Yangtian and Han Juntian nodded their heads. This was probably the best idea right now. What sort of a place is this truth sacred grounds? I do have half a mind of wanting to check it out. Lin Fan asked. It's somewhere in the extreme eastern area. There's a tall tower that extends all the way into the clouds over there, and that is none other than the truth scared grounds. Zheng Yangtian replied. Lin Fan's intention of wanting to head over to the truth scared grounds was not that bad of an idea either. Perhaps he could have those ancient immortal kings step out of their hermit lives earlier. That would certainly help to reduce the needless casualties in the endless mainland. The powerful beings on the side of the moon shadow mainland were simply way too many. The sheer numbers they possessed were extremely incredulous and downright horrifying. At the end of the day, the determining factor of victory for the war still boiled down to strength. However, if the endless mainland were to sustain considerable losses and countless of deaths, that might end up exhausting all of their resources. Lin Fan did not linger for much further. Entering the void, he rushed over to the extreme east. Truth-scared grounds. Lin Fan had to see for himself just what sort of beings those ancient immortal kings would be. The truth-scared grounds existed within a danger ground in itself. This wasn't a place that ordinary people would be able to arrive at. That tower extended all the way into the clouds, standing erect between the heaven and earth. In the surroundings of the tower was an aura of truth exuding out constantly. It was as though every single bit of truth from the heaven and earth was being spread out from this place right here. Boundless future Buddha Lord, since you've come, do come out then. At that moment, a voice traveled out from within that tall tower. Amitabha. Instantly, the void was filled with a bright flash of a Buddha light. Extending out like banners, an endless amount of Buddha lights appeared behind the back of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Seated cross-legged on that lotus seat of his, the gigantic body of the boundless future Buddha Lord floated gently within the void. His eyes shone with a cheery glint as he looked at that tall tower which possessed the only truth in the entire universe. Highs, it's been such a long time now, and you've yet to let it go. If you were able to let it go, there is no doubt that you would be the first person to enter the heavenly Lord state. The Truth Immortal King lamented. The boundless future Buddha Lord gave a muffled laugh. Truth Immortal King, cut the crap. Regarding the calamity of the endless mainland this time around, what do you think about it? At the moment when the boundless future Buddha Lord spoke out those words, it seemed as though the entire void around him had frozen solid. If the Truth Immortal King wanted to interfere in this affair, the only welcome he would receive would be nothing but death. Chapter 11:11 Way too cowardly. Chapter 11:11 Way too cowardly. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Silence. The entire heaven and earth fell entirely silent. All of a sudden, an extremely sharp tip of a brush soared out of the tower as the entire void was filled with an intense killing intent. The brows of the boundless future Buddha Lord furrowed. Are you thinking of striking out? November LBJNN. Shing. The brush tip came to a stop before dissipating out into nothingness. I only seek the truth, and will not bother myself in secular affairs. However, boundless future Buddha Lord, you are already treading down a path of mistakes. The heavenly Lord state is getting ever so distant from you. I shall not bother to trouble you with your Buddha Lord's personal affairs then. Just make sure you remember those words of yours. The boundless future Buddha Lord did not give the Truth Immortal King any bit of face at all. If they were to base it on seniority, the boundless future Buddha Lord was higher than the Truth Immortal King. Even if they were to base it in terms of strength, the boundless future Buddha Lord was much stronger than the Truth Immortal King as well. After that, the boundless future Buddha Lord turned around to leave immediately. Right now, he was headed for the last 3 remaining forbidden grounds. He was going to seek out the remaining 3 immortal kings. The most powerful immortal kings in the entire endless mainland were none other than those 3. However, the boundless future Buddha Lord had a great deal of confidence that he would be able to persuade them. As for this Truth Immortal King, he was filled with nothing but contempt toward him. FCK him and the truth of his. This is the most he will be able to amount to in his entire life. A few days later, Lin Fan stood in the void and looked at that towering building before him. Even though there was still quite some distance to it, he could already feel a power of truth being emitted out. This was an ancient immortal king here, therefore, he must naturally be formidable. Even though Lin Fan was also an immortal king right now, he knew that he definitely had to put on a low profile when coming across the Truth Immortal King later on. Who knew, the other party might feel happy and even give him some benefits because of that attitude. That was something no one could tell. Upon stepping foot into the truth's sacred grounds, Lin Fan could feel as though there was some tremendous power that was blocking him in his path. Isn't this just a barrier? Small matter. Curling his lips into a grin, Lin Fan shattered the surrounding barrier and made his way in forcefully. Who dares to trespass into the truth-scared grounds? The moment Lin Fan entered the boundaries of the grounds, a voice reverberated out in his ears. Truth Immortal King, this junior here is a disciple of the Heaven and Earth sect. The reason for my arrival this time around is to implore the Truth Immortal King, you, to come out of being a hermit and help suppress those invaders of the Moon Shadow mainland. After finishing those words, Lin Fan waited patiently. He knew that all powerful beings love their moments of silence. Who knew, they might even come out with some absurdly crazy big reason for their actions. Even though he might not be able to understand that bullshit, based on his experience, he knew that this would most likely be just like the 3 humble visits to the thatched hut. He would have to make his request a couple more times. You can go back, the Truth Immortal King said. Indeed, as he had guessed. Lin Fan realized that everything was going exactly as he had thought it would. The Truth Immortal King was truly just as he had expected. He must definitely have not shown enough sincerity the first time around. And not only that, all senior beings love to put on an act. Lin Fan would have to put his words nicely such that these seniors would feel like they were being looked upon with high regard. It would have to seem like juniors such as himself had no other choice but to seek their help. That was when they would definitely lend a hand of assistance. The one and only reason why Lin Fan wanted to get the Truth Immortal King out of his hermit state was just so that the latter could stand on the front lines and take on a huge wave of pressure for himself. It was true that the immortal kings of the endless mainland could take on the master gods and stand against them. However, they did not have the same capabilities to deal with some of the formidable master gods. Those were beings that only these ancient immortal kings could actually deal with. Now that the Truth Immortal King was asking Lin Fan to leave, how could he possibly accept that? He must definitely invite this guy out of his hermit state. Truth Immortal King, the entire endless mainland is in hot soup right now. We really, desperately require your assistance. Lin Fan spoke up once more. You can go back. This reply once again, Lin Fan was stunned with it right away. Couldn't this guy say anything different? However, Lin Fan wasn't someone who would not give up that easily. Unless he were to move the Truth Immortal King, he would definitely feel extremely indignant in his heart. Truth Immortal King, those living beings of the Moon Shadow Mainland are simply way too strong. We're almost unable to hold out any longer. If you do not come out of this hermit state soon, the whole endless mainland is going to be dead meat. This was the only way that Lin Fan could phrase things now. But, by the tone of the Truth Immortal King, it seemed as though this fellow was extremely reluctant. That was something that had Lin Fan feeling extremely troubled. I will never bother myself with the affairs of the endless mainland. The only thing I seek is the pursuit of truth. Wherever you came from, please go back. The Truth Immortal King said. Lin Fan was stunned as his brows furrowed slightly. By that tone of his, it sounded like he was really not intending to give them any bit of help at all. Truth Immortal King, if the endless mainland is destroyed, what use and purpose does your truth have? Lin Fan asked. Even if the endless mainland is destroyed, there is still the Moon Shadow Mainland. Truth does not differentiate between races. The Truth Immortal King said. The aura of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Did the boundless future Buddha Lord come over? Initially, Lin Fan had wanted to say something when he spotted a trace of dissipating aura from the void above. All of a sudden, it was so darned familiar. Junior, you should leave first. As for the affairs of the endless mainland, I'm not bothering about them anymore, and neither do I wish to. At that moment, a figure came out of the tall tower. Raising his head up at the void, Lin Fan caught sight of that figure clearly. The face of the Truth Immortal King was extremely calm as his long robes fluttered with the wind. The only thing he sought after was the truth. As for every other thing, he disregarded them entirely. Lin Fan looked at the Truth Immortal King and said, to think that the Truth Immortal King would be someone so afraid of death. Right now, he had finally understood the reason for all this. When the boundless future Buddha Lord came here, he must have told something to this Truth Immortal King. Otherwise, why else would the boundless future Buddha Lord come here? Brazen. The Truth Immortal King was angered. He had not expected that a mere junior would dare to speak of such words to him. A glistening brush floated out gently beside him up in the void. This brush was a legacy that was left behind by the Heavenly Lord Tao Comprehension, and possessed an extremely mystifying power. At this moment, the brush was emanating off an extremely sharp aura. This aura could slice through the void, and had a clear-cut killing intent. It was as though life and death could be determined through a single stroke of this brush. Lin Fan stood up in the void as his gaze narrowed while he looked at the Truth Immortal King. He truly wanted to throw out his soap and FCK this Truth Immortal King over to death. But on second thoughts, that wasn't worth it at all. Wasting the soap on this Truth Immortal King was really far too much of a waste. Truth Immortal King, the reason why I, Lin Fan, am willing to swallow my pride is all for the sake of the endless mainland. Otherwise, do you really think that we juniors are pushovers? Lin Fan looked at the Truth Immortal King in disdain. In the blink of an eye, the aura of Lin Fan as an immortal king burst forth immensely, causing the entire world to quake in the face of it. When the Truth Immortal King felt this aura, his face changed. He had not expected that this person before him would be an immortal king as well. He was someone in control of the truths of the world, writing everything into ranking roles. But, he had not expected that this person would have broken through to the immortal king state already. The Truth Immortal King gave Lin Fan a single look before turning around to leave, entering his Tower of Truth. Holy FCK! Lin Fan had not expected that this Truth Immortal King could actually remain so calm and head right back into that Tower of Truth of his. His lips then curled out into a grin. So be it then, since this guy loves to stay in this place so much, he can jolly well stay in it for the rest of his life then. With that, the power of Bigra erupted forth. Ever since Lin Fan had entered an immortal king state, all of his mystic skills had long evolved into immortal arts. With that, it also gave them a new lease of life, filling them with all sorts of mystifying powers. Odorless and colorless, it slowly seeped into the heaven and earth, wrapping up the entire Tower of Truth just like a bubble. If he wanted to break through this power of Bigra of Lin Fan, that would have to depend on whether he had the capabilities to do so then. Chapter 11:12 Indignant, Return to Kill. Chapter 11:12, Indignant, Return to Kill. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Within the Tower of Truth, the Truth Immortal King was standing in front of one of the windows right now. Gazing at the void outside, those peaceful eyes of his flashed with a lively glint. What has the endless mainland got to do with me? All I need to do is to preserve my own life and seek out the truth. Perhaps one day, that will lead me to attain the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord eventually. The Truth Immortal King was someone that was a recluse from the entire world. Controlling the heaven and earth truth role, his only motive was to attain the Tao of the Heavenly Lord and nothing else. However, despite that, he had not succeeded in all this while. Although, now that the endless mainland was being invaded by the Moon Shadow mainland, that did invoke some ideas in the mind of the Truth Immortal King, as though he had just discovered something. Perhaps, his brand of truth should be spread out into the rest of the world, so that countless people could revere and pray to it as the truth. Even if the boundless future Buddha Lord had not come looking for him, he might not have stepped into the fray anyway. After all, by the time one was at a state like his, they were practically indifferent to many things that were happening out in the world. All of a sudden, the Truth Immortal King saw the figure of Lin Fan in the void who had left earlier on. To think that he would return once more. Initially, Lin Fan had really left the place. The fact that the Truth Immortal King was so darned cowardly was something that he could not change. But as his foot stepped forth and he was prepared to leave, he got more infuriated thinking about everything. As an immortal king who had inherited the truth of the heaven and earth, as someone who was regarded by every single being of the endless mainland to be a bearer of truth, to think that he would bloody want to just stay back and watch a show now that the endless mainland was in danger. Bloody hell, it was as though he was really approving of the Moon Shadow mainland's infiltration of the endless mainland. This was something that Lin Fan was extremely pissed off about. To think that this guy would decide to not come out at all during such a critical juncture. Then, what was the use of keeping him alive? Right now, the only thought on Lin Fan's mind was to have the Truth Immortal King chopped to death. Otherwise, he would definitely feel vexed in his heart for not doing so. Not only that, there was the bloody aura of the boundless future Buddha Lord here earlier on as well. That must mean that this FCKER must have discussed things through with that bald monk then. Coupled with this fact, yours truly was hell-bent on destroying this guy. What have you returned for? The deafening voice of the Truth Immortal King boomed out. Within it was a trace of anger, as though if the other party chose not to leave, the only outcome awaiting them was death. He had been in this Tower of Truth for an extremely long time now. There had never been anyone who had dared to come here and act so audaciously. Heck, even those senior old masters of those major sects would not dare to come here as such. Therefore, the fact that this person had even dared to return was something that really displeased the Truth Immortal King. To chop you up. Stepping out onto the void, Lin Fan spoke out nonchalantly as he swung out his right arm, causing the eternal axe to appear in his palm amidst a flash. Raising it above his head, he cleaved it out at the Tower of Truth. To think that you could be so bloody indifferent toward the dangers of the endless mainland, and even dare to collude with the boundless future Buddha Lord. Since that's the case, what's the use of having you? An axe flash burst forth like a raging dragon that howled out malevolently, striking out at the Tower of Truth with a frightful force. That berserk power ripped the void and caused the barriers that surrounded the Tower of Truth to shatter immediately. Against an immortal king, what use were these barriers? They were nothing more than pieces of paper. The Truth Immortal King was enraged right now as he flicked out the crystal brush in his hands furiously. Right away, a text character of kill swam out like a coiling dragon between the heaven and earth. Even though it was just a single word, it possessed a boundless amount of killing intent. Right now, he was truly incensed. To think that someone would dare to strike out at him in this place of his. This guy was just practically showing him no respect at all. With that, a loud explosion boomed out. Those two massive forces collided against one another and erupted instantaneously, causing the surrounding void to crumble down and collapse endlessly. This was a duel between immortal kings, and was something that could only be described as earth-shattering. A little interesting, Lin Fan chuckled out as he kept his eternal axe. Closing his palms together, the source of power within him jerked furiously. Within the void, a beam of light emerged. The amount of power possessed within this was unmatched, and just the epitome of horror in itself. This was not something that ordinary people could hope to defend against. You can go to hell. Lin Fan roared out as he clapped his palms, aiming to crush the other party entirely. With that, the body of the Truth Immortal King shivered slightly. You shall not desecrate the truth. Disarm. Next, a gigantic golden text character appeared and floated through the heaven and earth before revolving out and forming a shield with it, blocking against the entire world. When that formidable power smashed against it, a reverberating sound boomed out. The expression of the Truth Immortal King was unchanging. Even though he was not the strongest immortal king there was he in existence that could endure the humiliating actions of a junior at this level? Only, he had not expected that this junior that he was once keeping an eye on had actually grown to such a state. This was something that was rather inconceivable. In the history of the entire endless mainland, there had truly never been another junior being who could cultivate at such a rapid speed. In just a few mere years, he had already grown to such an extent. If he were to be accorded any more time, wouldn't he simply just defy the entire heavens by himself? However, there was no way that the Truth Immortal King would actually show some thoughts of mercy or pity just because the other party was a supreme paragon. Now that this junior had angered him, his only response was to have him slain so that he could rest in eternal slumber at this place. At that moment, the Truth Immortal King suddenly felt the void in front of him tremble slightly. In the blink of an eye, a single fist that brought forth a berserk amount of power pummeled down at him. Bam! Lin Fan had not expected that the reaction of the Truth Immortal King would be this quick, and would be able to defend against that attack of his with his palm instantly. Now that Lin Fan was an immortal king, the one thing that he loved to do was engage in melee combat. It was only through this that he could actually feel the adrenaline and pleasures of fighting. The 9-5 legendary brick appeared in his left hand in a flash, moving out at light speed and slamming toward the back of the Truth Immortal King's head. The Truth Immortal King was stunned when he caught sight of that mysterious red object. Even though he could not feel even the slightest trace of aura from it, he did not know why, but he had a hunch that it was something extremely dangerous. Instantly, he lifted his finger and tapped onto that 9-5 legendary brick. But, it was right then that Lin Fan's lips curled into a smirk. Raising his right leg furiously, he swung it toward the groin of the Truth Immortal King. So despicable. The Truth Immortal King frowned as his body moved nimbly. In the blink of an eye, he had already switched positions and was now behind Lin Fan's back. The crystal brush in his hand pointed out at the back of Lin Fan and shot forth with a tremendous amount of power. Ugh! A mouthful of fresh blood sprayed out. Lin Fan's body suddenly wobbled forward. Truth Immortal King, now that the endless mainland is in the midst of deep trouble, why do you choose to sit back idly and just watch? Lin Fan clutched his chest as he raised his head and looked at the Truth Immortal King while asking. You do not understand my pursuits. The Truth Immortal King lifted his hand. The truth crystal brush in his hand quivered slightly, possessing all the truth of the heaven and earth. As he pointed out with it, the void crumpled slightly, sending that impact onto the body of Lin Fan. Lin Fan took a step forward. All of a sudden, his face was frightfully pale as though he had lost any bit of heart left to resist this. Raising his head, he continued, yes, I truly do not understand your pursuits. However, there is still no reason for you to collude with the boundless future Buddha Lord. The Truth Immortal King looked at Lin Fan before him. However, there was something that was nagging at him in his mind right now. Had his strength truly turned that formidable somehow? The other party was an immortal king as well. Even though this guy might not be a match for him personally, there should be no reason how he could be defeated this quickly, right? Could he have unconsciously treaded onto a higher cultivation state in his pursuit for the truth after all these years? Was it because he had not realized it himself, and that was all? However, at this point, he was no longer thinking that much about everything. That was because this person before him had to die, no matter what. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. The might of the Truth Immortal King was not something that this fella could come and insult. Furthermore, if one were struck out by the truth crystal brush, even if they were immortal kings, they would not be able to endure it. One step after another, Lin Fan walked out toward the Truth Immortal King. At this point, he was practically nothing in the eyes of the Truth Immortal King. As the latter pointed out his brush one stroke after another, a series of bright flashes of light struck out and exploded onto Lin Fan's body. The affairs of the boundless future Buddha Lord are not something that you can hope to understand. While the pursuits of you beings are to merely live on with life and survive, our pursuits lie in the path of the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord. If you were to devote your heart toward cultivating, perhaps someone like you might have a shot at attaining the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord. But, it's a pity that that chance is gone. After all, you're just going to have to die here. The Truth Immortal King scoffed out coldly as the crystal brush in his hand struck out at Lin Fan's body time and again. Right now, Lin Fan's body was drenched with fresh blood dripping down all over him. Yet, he continued to wobble and struggle ahead till he finally arrived at the face of the Truth Immortal King. He then lifted his fist ever so slightly, however, it was all soft and limp, without any bit of strength in it at all. Peok! It made contact with the chest of the Truth Immortal King. Thereafter, he croaked out as though he was using every single last bit of strength he had, "Why, you're really not fit to be the truth." His fist slipped down, both his knees curved down. It was truly as though Lin Fan had expended everything he had. The eyes of the Truth Immortal King were fixated onto Lin Fan before him with an extremely indifferent expression. He could not care less about this person before him. As Lin Fan's hand slowly continued on its path of descent, it went from his chest down to his tummy, then to his crotch. Crunch, twisting heaven and earth, a reverberating sound rang across the entire world. That initially calm expression of the Truth Immortal King was suddenly replaced with one where his jaws were gaping wide open. His eyes jerked open with horror, as that once nonchalant expression of his gradually grimaced. For the Truth Immortal King, the entire heaven and earth seemed as though they were crushed at this very moment. A melancholic and sharp pain was slowly traveling through his body from that crotch area of his. Arg! A tragic cry rang out. Even if it were an immortal king state being, there was no way they could actually withstand this underhanded move at this moment. The sweat of the Truth Immortal King was literally pouring down his head as his knees buckled out slowly into a beautiful arc. Looking at Lin Fan with a face of pain, he struggled to speak up. "Liu Sen." Lin Fan looked at the Truth Immortal King calmly while shaking his head gently. Reaching into his storage, Lin Fan took out a dagger with aplomb. "Well, goodbye now, Truth. Don't worry, I'll bring your experience points together with me and we'll work hard together, alright? That just proves that you're still somewhat useful, doesn't it?" Splitch. 1 stab, 2 stabs, 3 stabs, 4 stabs. ... The stabs continued until the truth dissipated from the world totally. From that day forth, the roles of the heaven and earth disappeared from the face of the universe. Chapter 1113 Unusually Horrifying. Chapter 1113, Unusually Horrifying. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Highs. Everything has ended now. Lin Fan wiped the fresh blood off his dagger. This was an object stained with the blood of the Truth Immortal King. For any martial artist, this was practically as good as a miraculous medicine or elixir. However, at this moment, all that blood was just spraying out into the world with such extravagant wastefulness. The Truth Immortal King was very strong, but what FCK use was strong? At times, what mattered the most in a fight was not whether one was bloody strong or not, it was whether one had a plan or not. Considering Lin Fan's firm and steady plan right now, it was just like a ride in a sturdy jeep, without any single chance of the vehicle flipping over. However, if he were to use something like this on the boundless future Buddha Lord, that would be rather dangerous now. That bald monk was someone exceptionally crafty, and wasn't some bloody moronic trash that could just fall for any tricks whatsoever. Therefore, if Lin Fan were to face up against the boundless future Buddha Lord, he would only have to take down the other party with pure strength now. How could you possibly? At that moment, the Truth Immortal King raised his head as both of his eyes shone off with a glimmer that could disappear at any moment now. However, the amazing thing was how he could still retain that single breath of life even at this point. Yet another stab down. That dagger which was initially wiped perfectly clean was now stained with a patch of red once more. The eyes of the Truth Immortal King bolted wide open just like those of a cow's. However, any single light of life within them were gone entirely by now, leaving nothing but a single trace of disbelief in them. Even at the point of his death, he could probably not have understood how everything had come to be. How in the world could there have been nothing wrong with this guy at all? And also, what in the world was that final move with his groin being grabbed by this fella? Lin Fan raised his hand and punched down onto the face of the Truth Immortal King. "If you're dead, so be it. Don't give me that face." Ding. Congratulations on killing Truth Immortal King. Ding. Experience points plus. Ding. Obtain Truth Crystal Brush. At this moment, the notifications that came forth from the system brought for Lin Fan a great sense of pleasure. This was exactly the sort of feeling that he wanted to experience. He then gave his dagger a good rub and cleaned away the blood on it once more. Even though the Truth Immortal King is an ancient immortal king, his strength isn't the strongest of them all. Although, I've got to say that compared to myself, he was still quite a bit stronger. Guess all he could blame was that he wasn't crafty enough, and ended up being FCKED over by my plans. Lin Fan chuckled out, as he pointed out with his finger, that godly technique of bare nudiness was used right away, stripping the truth immortal king clean of his clothes such that he didn't have a single treasure left on his body. To think that as a truth immortal king, he could not even retain a single shred of dignity post his death. This was something that was just worthy of crying over. Lin Fan scanned through the stuff within the storage ring of the truth immortal king. The moment he saw that there were pills in them, he almost vomited out. While there were quite a significant amount of pills within, they were no longer of any use to him right now. It might be a better idea for him to leave them for others. As for the other treasures, there was nothing that Lin Fan deemed worthy. Ah, to think that you would dare to kill the truth immortal king. Do you know that you have just committed a heinous crime against the heavens? The weapon spirit in the truth crystal brush yelled out, unable to believe everything it was witnessing at this moment. To think that the ancient immortal truth immortal king would be killed by this fella right here. From this day forth, all the truths in the world were going to disappear entirely. Not only that, this truth immortal king was a descendant of the heavenly Lord Tao comprehension. Lin Fan looked at the truth crystal brush in his hand and chuckled out, to think that a mere little tiny weapon spirit such as yourself would dare to act so insolently. Aren't you afraid of being devoured whole by me? Hearing that, the truth crystal brush lost all of its courage instantly. It then barked out, "You'd dare. I am an item used by the heavenly Lord Tao comprehension to attain the Tao, an utmost unrivaled existence. If you dare to swallow me, heavenly Lord Tao comprehension will definitely not let you off. N-O-V-E in .c Om. Heavenly Lord Tao comprehension will definitely not let me off. So, you mean to say that the heavenly Lord Tao comprehension is still alive or something?" Suddenly, Lin Fan noticed the main point in what this weapon spirit had just said. "And no, I know nothing," the truth crystal brush howled out. Lin Fan suppressed the truth crystal brush before destroying it with a single bite and swallowing it into his tummy. After it was fused with the big ancient demon, its razor-sharp powers enveloped the latter momentarily. From that, the big ancient demon received the power of truth. Naturally, compared to the truth immortal king himself, there was still quite that bit of difference. However, this was a treasure that truly had some genuine value to it. Lin Fan pursed his lips. After he devoured the truth crystal brush, he understood everything as well. Bloody hell, seems like you really do know nothing. And yet, you had dared to put on an act before me. You deserve to die. After killing the truth immortal king, Lin Fan's strength received a huge booster. While he was still in the immortal king state, there was quite a significant jump in his powers compared to before. There were 3 other places. Seemed like he would have to go pay them a visit as well. Suddenly, Lin Fan raised his head as his brows furrowed. He felt as though someone was peeping at him, but that feeling disappeared from his consciousness in a flash right after. Southern Demon Ocean region. Rushing the entire way, Lin Fan finally arrived at his destination. This Southern Demon Ocean region was a place in the endless mainland that nobody would dare to come explore. This was because this entire place was filled with demons that appeared in vast groups. Even immortal lords would not dare to tread in this place. In a moment of carelessness, one could find their essence, spirit, and vitality disappearing away after all. This was especially the case for the ocean region around this place. While it might look to be calm on the surface, there were countless dangers that lurked within. If one were to slip up, they would not even know how they would end up dying. Taking a single glance over, Lin Fan could tell that there were countless dangerous creatures buried beneath it. All of them were waiting in ambush for their prey to descend. Right now, Lin Fan was an immortal king. Given his strength, it was no issue for him to reign over an entire part of the world completely. There was no place where he was restricted from heading to. Letting off his aura ever so slightly was enough for all the demons lurking around the oceans to rein themselves in and not dare to act insolently. Crossing through the layers of void one after another, he finally caught sight of a pitch-black mountain. There was a fire being spat out of the tip of the mountain as the entire place was shrouded in a thick demonic chi. Within that same demonic chi were countless vengeful spirits that were crying out and howling. But, when they caught sight of Lin Fan, it was as though they had just seen a ghost as all of them bolted back into hiding. "Is the Southern Demon Immortal King here?" Lin Fan shouted out at the top of his lungs, asking. Right now, Lin Fan was starting to realize something about all these ancient immortal kings and whatnot. All of them were asking to be beaten up. If he were to be all polite and respectful toward them, they could come off with such cockiness that it would seem as though they were high up in the heavens. Now, the thing about humans was that they must not be spoiled. The more one spoiled them, the bigger their egos would get. In the depths of the Black Mountain, the southern demon immortal king sat down cross-legged calmly. When he caught sight of the situation outside, he could not help but wipe off the beads of sweat that were dripping down his forehead. Earlier on, the boundless future Buddha Lord had made his way here. Between the two of them, it could be said that there was a negotiation, but it sure didn't seem that way either. However, there was a single conclusion that came out of it. As long as the living beings of the Moon's Shadow mainland did not interfere with the southern demon ocean region, he would not interfere either. But of course, he wasn't willing to clash with the boundless future Buddha Lord to begin with. At the same time, the latter had promised him some benefits that had him considering this to be a pretty decent deal to cut. After that, he wanted to go seek out the Truth Immortal King to discuss this issue. But, who would have known that when he had arrived there, the only thing he saw was this fella driving his dagger straight into the Truth Immortal King, stabbing the latter to death. Those methods were unusually ruthless. He did not even leave the Truth Immortal King a single shred of dignity upon his death. Even though the Southern Demon Immortal King did not know just what exactly was going on outside at the moment, in his mind, this fella was practically way scarier than the boundless future Buddha Lord. But, now that the other party had come knocking, there was no way he could just sit back and ignore it either. He then lifted his finger casually. Lin Fan had been standing outside for some time now. Just as he was all ready to bark out in rage, the ocean region split apart as a cave appeared. Thereafter, a figure came out of the cave. The Southern Demon Immortal King had a head full of long, black hair that fluttered with the wind. That handsome face of his brought along a smile. I apologize for not coming forth to greet you personally upon your grand arrival. With a beaming face, the Southern Demon Immortal King came forth and greeted in a chirpy tone. Lin Fan's heart was filled with joy at this moment. To think that this Southern Demon Immortal King would be so polite. Southern Demon Immortal King, I've long heard of your great name, and it's a huge honor to finally meet you at last. I am Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect. Now, to cut the long story short, the Endless Mainland is facing an extremely dire crisis right now. I would wish to implore the Southern Demon Immortal King to lend his hand in assistance. What do you think about this suggestion, Southern Demon Immortal King? The Southern Demon Immortal King went silent for a moment. This was quite the difficult situation that he was being placed in right now. Chapter 1114 FCKED over. 1114 FCKED over. Lin Fan looked at the Southern Demon Immortal King and noticed that his eyes were looking somewhat strange. Southern Demon Immortal King, do you have any difficulties that you have trouble sharing? If you truly do have them, please share it with me. I think you will find me to be an extremely understanding man. Looking at the expression on Lin Fan's face right now, the Southern Demon Immortal King felt that there was an extremely high chance that he would end up in the same state as the Truth Immortal King if he did not give a satisfactory answer today. As an Immortal King, he was naturally not afraid of anyone else. But, when he thought about how this person could even stab the Truth Immortal King to death just like that and yet sustain zero injuries altogether, that was evident that he was far from normal. Even though the attitude of the other party seemed as though he was making a request right now, that was a mix of arrogance within his expression as well. It really did seem as though if he didn't accede to the other's request, this guy was going to go on to a massacring spree. After contemplating for a moment, the Southern Demon Immortal King declared righteously, since the Endless Mainland is going through a dire crisis right now, how could I possibly sit by and watch idly as an Immortal King? For this matter, be at ease. I will definitely come out of my hermit isolation to lend my hand of assistance. Lin Fan's heart leapt with joy. Ah, Southern Demon Immortal King. You're truly a man understanding the world. That's right, now that the Endless Mainland is on the brink of being infiltrated, how can Immortal Kings just place themselves out of the situation? Come, let's go, we'll leave this place right away. Hold on. Immediately, the Southern Demon Immortal King paused before his face softened down. Recently, I have been in the midst of cultivating an immortal art. Once that immortal art of mine is completed, even those master gods of the Moon Shadow Mainland will definitely not be a match for me. Now that those master gods of the Moon Shadow Mainland have yet to appear, this grants me a few days of respite to work at it. How about waiting for the master gods of the Moon Shadow Mainland to appear before I come forth and join in the fray? What do you think about that? Lin Fan looked at the Southern Demon Immortal King warily. I sniffed the aura of the boundless future Buddha Lord around. Are you thinking of not going? Or perhaps you're trying to lie to me? No, absolutely not. Regarding this affair, I, the Southern Demon Immortal King, can definitely not sit by idly and do nothing. The Southern Demon Immortal King said loudly. However, he was feeling a little enraged in his heart right now, just that there was no way to vent that feeling of frustration. If this were anyone else, he would have long crushed the other party. But, this man before him was extremely dangerous, and not one to trifle with. He had to play it safe. Based on what he had witnessed, the risk of ruffling the feathers of this man before him was way too high. It was still best for him to avoid conflicts. November LBJNN. Then, what do you mean by that? Lin Fan asked again. Based on what I know, there are a couple of master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland that possess an incredible amount of strength, and are definitely not beings that I can go against at this moment. If I could only cultivate my immortal art successfully in this period of time, I will have a greater amount of confidence toward this affair. Therefore, at such a critical juncture, I cannot waste even a single drop of time. But rest assured, even though I'm not going forth right now, I will have my Black Heavens Demon King lead a huge army to answer your call for fighters on the front line. The Southern Demon Immortal King said, then lifted his finger. Right away, a torrential wave burst forth from that peaceful ocean surface, with an extremely horrifying aura seeping out of it. Lin Fan narrowed his gaze over and discovered that there was a huge vortex that had appeared on the surface of the ocean. It was so deep that one could not make out the depths of it as it exuded forth an extremely chilling aura. Trample, trample, the stampeding sounds of a grand army of men and horses reverberated out as a black flag appeared as well. The moment that flag appeared, the entire world dimmed down. A single warrior that wielded that huge flag with one arm of his appeared on the ocean surface, riding a big, black horse. A single look over and one could see is at least 10,000 of them. This was a huge army with a formidable might, as though they had been through millions and millions of battles by now, generating a bloody stench from their aura alone. This is my Black Heavens Demon King army. Any single immortal lord that falls within it would definitely be met with a demise with utmost certainty. Even if it were an immortal king being, they would have to spend quite a bit of effort to actually deal with them. With these guys joining the fray, I believe that they will definitely be a great help for you. The Southern Demon Immortal King said. At the same time, he felt extremely pained in his heart. This Black Heavens Demon King army was something that he had built up over countless of years and effort. Once it was fully completed, it would be able to deal with even immortal king state beings. And, to think that now that it was already 80% completed, he would have no other choice than to use this to pacify the other party. Lin Fan looked at the gigantic army and could not help but nod his head in approval. There was a pretty decent aura of might that was being exuded out of it. However, this could only hold down normal immortal kings. If it were to meet with powerful immortal kings such as the boundless future Buddha Lord, it would be destroyed by the flip of his palm for sure. But, this should do to deal with most common powerful beings. There were way too many of those living beings from the Moon Shadow mainland. Bringing an armored army as such into the fray would definitely reduce the amount of pressure mounting on them. Good. Now, Southern Demon Immortal King, I hope that you will go by your promises and come forth to render a hand of assistance once those master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland arrive. Lin Fan continued. That's of course. I, the Southern Demon Immortal King, will definitely try my best. The Southern Demon Immortal King agreed. When Lin Fan swept his robes, that gigantic Black Heavens Demon King army turned into a thick, dense black mist before eventually converging down into a single war flag. There was a strong killing intent in that same black mist that circled around that war flag. Farewell then. Given the current situation, this was more than enough, since the Southern Demon Immortal King had already agreed to lend a hand to the matter. As for what would happen later on, that was something that Lin Fan could not possibly predict. If the Southern Demon Immortal King were to renege on his words when the time came, all he had to do was to stab this guy to death, and that was all. The Southern Demon Immortal King nodded his head. After Lin Fan left, that calm expression on his face turned menacingly sharp. A demon that had reigned over the entire world since time immemorial wasn't something that others could possibly insult. Amitabha, Southern Demon Immortal King, for you to be humiliated by a junior, I do feel somewhat bad about that. The boundless future Buddha Lord appeared between the heaven and earth. Doesn't matter. Just what are you planning exactly, boundless future Buddha Lord? Even though that junior is an immortal king state being, if you were to take action, I suppose you should be able to have him beaten down rather easily, shouldn't you? The Southern Demon Immortal King asked. The boundless future Buddha Lord merely smiled without replying as he muttered out his Buddhist chants. However, his eyes were shining with a strange expression. If not for that supernatural toy that lad was in possession of, how could he possibly be afraid of someone like that? However, the time was not ripe just yet. Right now, he was in no hurry. The fact that they had not managed to kill this lad during that big battle together with the War Master God must evidently mean that he was someone with an extremely good fortune shining on him, and wasn't going to be killed that easily. Since that was the case, he might as well just wait for the Master Gods to descend and borrow their might together. Who knew, something unexpected may happen by that time. Looking at how the boundless future Buddha Lord was not saying anything more about it, the Southern Demon Immortal King swept his robes and returned to that black mountain of his. That Black Heaven Demon King army was just a merely substandard product. The real finished product was something that he was controlling himself, a gigantic army that could suppress and fight even immortal kings. How could he possibly be willing to give it up to a junior as such? As for the truth immortal king, a fool of that level deserved to die entirely. If not for the fact that his ancestor was the heavenly Lord Tao Comprehension, no one would have given a single bit of sh*t about him. Only, whether or not the heavenly Lord Tao Comprehension had truly fallen was a fact that no one could tell for sure. That was the reason why everyone was still being careful toward that guy. As for the boundless future Buddha Lord, that was no simple man either. He must definitely be coveting over the Tao of the heavenly Lord. There was a need to be on guard against this person as well. As for those master gods, the Southern Demon Immortal King had already agreed on things with a couple of them since a long time ago. Therefore, it was only natural that he would not interfere in the affairs of the Endless Mainland at all. What those master gods required was faith, and what the people of the Endless Mainland required was the Tao of the Heavenly Lord. There was no connection between both sides, but they could make use of one another. As for the lives of those ants in either mainland, what had that got to do with them? There was no one at the Hell Sea's Blood Mountains. No one at the Destitute Spirits Abyss either. By the time Lin Fan arrived at those two places, he found them to be completely empty. Heck, there wasn't even a single shadow to be seen. Seemed like they must be trying to avoid him. Chapter 11:15 Training. Chapter 11:15 Training. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. This is one hell of a bloody mother f*** King Dogs T. Lin Fan stood tall between the heaven and earth and cussed out. To think that there wasn't even a single shadow at the last two places. All of them had run away completely. That was truly one hell of a shish-tea fest. However, he could understand the reason why. All of them must have known that he was going to come, and therefore, were hiding away to avoid facing him. Naturally, Lin Fan chose to forgive them. Only, if he were to bump into them again, all of them had to be chopped to death. This Black Heaven's Demon King army is pretty decent. However, there's one big problem with it. Does that Southern Demon Immortal King really think that yours truly is an idiot? If something like this was all that an Immortal King could craft, that would be one hell of an embarrassment. Lin Fan was no fool. If an Immortal King had to craft for such a long time only to create something of this level, that would really be something that he ought to be ashamed of. However, it was true that something like this could truly only be created by the Southern Demon Immortal King. After all, some of the materials required were pretty special, and exclusive only to the Southern Demon Ocean regions. This Black Heaven's Demon King army looked like they were living beings, but in reality, it was just a treasure, one that could manifest into a human form. Lin Fan was prepared to work with it slightly so that he could give this Black Heaven's Demon King army a boost in its power. Heaven and earth smelt. He tossed the Black Heaven's Demon King army into it right away as the blazing flames burnt to remove any bit of impurities from it. Within the heaven and earth smelt, the Black Heaven's Demon King army was transforming continuously. Thereafter, Lin Fan discovered a trace of the Southern Demon Immortal King's will within it. This was the thing that was used by the Southern Demon Immortal King to maintain control over it. As long as this wasn't purged out, the Black Heaven's Demon King army would always belong to the Southern Demon Immortal King forever, and Lin Fan would only just be making use of it temporarily. The will of an Immortal King was not something that was to be removed so easily. However, in the face of the heaven and earth smelt, there was nothing that couldn't be purged in this entire world. November LBJNN. A drop of fire landed onto the will of the Immortal King, giving off a sizzling, burning sound. Within the Black Mountain, the Southern Demon Immortal King was contemplating about everything that had just happened, and at the same time, thinking about the measures he should take to deal with everything he would be facing in the future. All of a sudden, he felt his heart jerk. His control over the Black Heaven's Demon King army had suddenly disappeared. The Southern Demon Immortal King furrowed his brows and bolted upright immediately. How could this be? To think that that lad would be able to wipe my will away from it. That is something that's pretty incredulous now. The boundless future Buddha Lord is clearly stronger than this lad, yet he chooses not to have him killed. By the looks of it, there must be something that he's taking into consideration. Seems like this lad is not someone simple. I must be careful not to fall into the traps of the boundless future Buddha Lord either. Within the heaven and earth smelt. A black mist was billowing out before changing forms repeatedly, and finally regrouping into that black heaven's demon king army. Its aura was way stronger than before. While it wasn't at some utterly horrifying state, it was still quite a lot better than its earlier state. At the same time, Lin Fan now had absolute control over the Black Heaven's Demon King army. As for that Southern Demon Immortal King, he could just scram as far as he could at this point. Master, thud, 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 the entire Black Heaven's Demon King army dropped to their knees. Every single one of them was at least 10 feet tall, and could be described as mini-moving mountains. The war horses that they were riding on were extremely robust, and filled with a mighty disposition. This is what I call something of my own. Lin Fan smiled out. Indeed, the Southern Demon Immortal King still had some capabilities after all, for him to be able to create something as such. Now that Lin Fan had destroyed the other party's authority over this entirely, he wondered what that guy must be thinking. However, if he were willing to hand over something as such to Lin Fan, he must definitely be keeping something stronger up his sleeves. Get up, Lin Fan said. Yes, there were a full 10,000 troops in that Black Heaven's Demon King army. If they were to join forces, they were truly capable of surrounding and trapping any ordinary Immortal King state beings. However, they would not have what it took to have those Immortal Kings killed. Lin Fan spread his palm wide open, and all the pills that he had obtained from killing the Truth Immortal King flew out instantly. As those pills floated out in the void, Lin Fan could not help but acknowledge that the amount of pills stored by a veteran Immortal King was indeed immense. Striking out, he destroyed all of those pills immediately. The pill spirits within did not have a single chance at fighting back as they were all converted into a pill river. When Lin Fan looked at immortal pills now, the only feeling he had was repulsion. Even if he were to just take a whiff of their scent, it would be enough for him to puke out. But right now, there was finally a place for those pills to be used. They would boost the strength of the Black Heaven's Demon King army entirely. Lin Fan clapped out with his palms furiously, and right away, that tremendous amount of pill power gushed down just like a waterfall. The troops of the Black Heaven's Demon King army raised their heads and opened their gigantic mouths, drinking down this pure flow of the power of pills. Crack, crack, the sounds of bones cracking sounded out as a series of ferocious roars boomed across the entire world. One after another, those Black Heaven's Demon Kings growled out furiously as the evil demon horns on the top of their heads produced lightning that coiled around it constantly. The lightning then surged out all the way, curving toward their backs before finally extending down onto their heels. One after another, the faces of those Black Heaven's Demon Kings turned even more malevolent, as though they were some vile abyssal devils. Just that might alone was more than enough to scare the sh*t out of people. When those war horses that they were riding on sucked in a portion of that medicine, they started evolving as well. All four of their hooves started burning with a fiery purple flame as though they were treading onto the grounds of hell itself. An aura burst forth from these Black Heaven Demon Kings as they formed a vortex that enveloped the entire heaven and earth within. With that, Lin Fan nodded his head in satisfaction. This was the way a true Black Heaven's Demon King army should be like. The booster of these pills from the Truth Immortal King had literally raised their power level up by a few states. Not bad. Given the current situation, even if it's the ordinary Immortal Kings, it should be able to kill them instantly. Let's go. Time to take you guys for a test drive. Spreading his hand wide open, all of those Black Heaven's Demon Kings immediately converged into a single war flag that flew out into his hand. If the Southern Demon Immortal King were to catch sight of this, he would definitely spit out a mouthful of old blood. To think that this lad would use the entire fortune of the Truth Immortal King on these trashes. He would definitely faint over in a fit of anger at this sight. That was because the fortune of an ancient Immortal King was something that was vast as the oceans. If one were to utilize it properly, they would definitely be able to unleash a huge amount of potential. All the senior old masters of the Heaven and Earth sect and the other major sects were striking out right now. They had already divided and delegated out the portions of the endless mainland that had yet to be overrun, and had sent disciples of their sects to guard over them so as to fight against the invasion of the Moon Shadow mainland. However, the invasion of the Moon Shadow mainland truly came in gigantic waves. Compared to the endless mainland, their numbers were countless times greater. At this moment, when Lin Fan appeared out of the void, there was a line of defense that was engaging in a fight against an invading assault. The troops of the Moon Shadow mainland had descended and brought with them all sorts of magical beasts. This was yet another product of the Moon Shadow mainland. All of those magical beasts varied in types and were proficient in both ranged and melee attacks. Not only that, their physical bodies were extremely strong, such that even legendary weapons and equipment of the endless mainland could not peel away their defenses at all. Right then, there was a thin obstructing barrier wall that was constructed with unparalleled mystic skills as a temporary resort. As countless disciples looked upon this barrier wall, their eyes shone with a troubled look. They had already defended against quite a few waves of enemies by now, and had sustained considerable losses. At the same time, those magical beasts were also gaining more of an understanding toward them. Boom! A furious roar reverberated throughout the heaven and earth. In the far distance, the ground tore asunder as spikes shot up one after another from beneath. These spikes were a full dozens of feet tall, causing a gigantic blister to form on the ground as though something was trying to bore through it. Bam! The blister exploded out as a gigantic towering figure appeared before the eyes of all these disciples. That figure was an enormous bear. When it stood erect, it was a full colossal 100 feet tall. The ash-gray fur on its body was immensely thick. Following behind this gigantic bear was a huge legion of magic beasts, every single one of them were extremely enormous as well. However, compared to this gigantic bear, it was naturally like comparing an adult with a child. Watch out, that's the Moon Shadow Mainland's super god beast, Big Earth King Bear. Some of the disciples on top of the wall shouted out. Lin Fan turned his head around and looked over at the distance where a heaven-piercing totem stood upright. On top of the totem was a weird humanoid creature with 9 heads. That was the god in the eyes of these magical beasts, the magical beast master god. Roar! The Big Earth King Bear spread both of its paws wide open and roared out furiously, causing a ferocious, thunderous growl to reverberate across everyone's eardrums. Some of the disciples with a lower cultivation state could only clutch at their ears in pain. Don't you dare get brazen now! All of a sudden, an elder on the top of the wall bolted up into the skies, as the long sword he was wielding in his hands let out a long streak of light when he slashed out at that Big Earth King Bear. This was a saint immortal state being with a rather formidable strength. As he slashed out with his sword, the entire void was ripped apart by his sword wool, that crushed out onto the body of that Big Earth King Bear. Elder Qingshan has made his move. The disciples on the top of the wall shouted out excitedly. However, that excited feeling they had did not sustain for much longer as they were totally rattled by the sight before them. Slamming out with his bare paw, the Big Earth King Bear caused the entire void to crumble down and collapse onto the body of Wang Qingshan. The sword light in his hands flashed out as he tried to fight it forcefully, sending forth a tremendous amount of power in retaliation. Even though he was a saint immortal, he was being way too careless right now. He should have never tried to fight against the might of the Big Earth King Bear forcefully. Bam! Just like a bomb, Wang Qingshan was sent darting back before shooting right into the ground. Spitting out a fresh mouthful of blood and trying his best to endure the injury sustained, his body then flashed out and moved nimbly as he dodged the gigantic stomp of the Big Earth King Bear that came right after, escaping back onto the top of the wall. Standing upright where he was, the Big Earth King Bear opened its mouth. These indigenous beings are far too weak. Just as everyone was feeling tense about the current situation, the void boomed out with a reply, "Is that so?" A black flag pierced through before being planted firmly onto the ground right before the face of the Big Earth King Bear, digging itself deep into the earth. The flag swayed along with the winds, giving off a mighty pounding sound as it exuded a tremendously mighty killing intent. Everyone raised their heads and turned their gazes toward the void above them in a flush. Lin Fan stood there, calm and nonchalant as he spoke up indifferently, "Kill." Chapter 11:16 Go Wild, Power of Bigra. Chapter 11:16 Go Wild, Power of Bigra. Lin Fan was someone who had been out and about in the world. Therefore, even though there were so many disciples spectating right now, there was no way he would get nervous at all. This was a routine that he was extremely used to by now. His expression was natural as his hands were placed behind his back. Focusing his gaze, he gave off a slightly repressing aura. Even though this repressing aura was invisible and odorless, it was something extremely alarming for those disciples down below. Who is he? I've got no idea, but no matter what, he's definitely someone of the endless mainland. And, he has even stuck in to bail us out. Hold on a minute, he looks extremely familiar. Wang Qingshan raised his head over as he wiped away the blood from the sides of his lips, his brows furrowing out. Since when was there a character as such within the endless mainland? He then pondered deeper into this. But all of a sudden, he yelled out with a thunderous shout, "He is Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect." Hearing that, all of the surrounding disciples were completely astounded. What? He is the Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect? That genius disciple that had taken down the entire Kunlun God sect. Rumors had it that he had slain the Grand Master of the Kunlun God sect. Heck, Even White Saint could do nothing against him. What can the Grand Master of the Kunlun God sect even amount to? This was the man who had slain a senior old master of the Kunlun God sect. All of those old masters are immortal king state beings. Uproar, astonishment, all of these disciples let out looks of utter disbelief. Thereafter, as though something had just struck them, they started yelling out as well, "Does this mean that we're saved now? Look at that flag over there." Yet another round of uproar. All of those disciples cast their gazes in a flush over at the flag on that battlefield. Stabbing deep into the ground, that black flag fluttered along with the wind as a ferocious killing intent shrouded the entire world. On that desolate ground, a slight breeze gusted and blew up a patch of dust clouds. Uproar. The fluttering of the flag was getting faster as a monstrous demonic chi slowly started to gather up in the void. Within that demonic chi, there seemed to be thousands and thousands of steel mounts that were creating a huge ruckus, rampaging out relentlessly. A gigantic Black Heavens demon king rode on his demonic horse out from within that demonic chi. One after another, a total of 10,000 Black Heavens demon kings marched their way out from within. With that, an intensely horrifying aura burst forth. Even the big Earth King Bear was so rattled that it retreated back a single step in fear, both of its eyes shining with a look of terror. He could clearly sniff out the smell of death from this. When the masses caught sight of this, they were petrified. What in the world are those things? Why the hell is their aura so bloody formidable? The Black Heavens demon kings that had undergone Lin Fan's nurturing were nothing like before. Not only that, these were beings that had consumed all the pills of the truth immortal king, therefore, their might was definitely unmatched. If even ordinary immortal kings could be slain by these Black Heavens demon kings, these disciples would definitely stand no chance at all. The big Earth King Bear roared out, "Retreat! A powerful indigenous being has arrived." For the big Earth King Bear to be able to turn into a super god beast, his intellect was naturally not too low. He could tell that these steel mounts before him were not something that they could deal with. Lin Fan's lips curled into a grin. "Come as you wish and leave as you wish. Do you really think that things would be that easy? Go and suppress them, but don't kill them." Yes, the boundless voices boomed out as those Black Heavens demon kings were fiercer than anything else out there. The demonic horses that they were riding on galloped over furiously as the entire heaven and earth were filled with nothing but their killing intent. And right now, Lin Fan had just thought of something that was even more fun. Since these fellas had dared to invade the endless mainland, he would naturally have to give them a good welcome. When the long spears in the hand of the Black Heavens demon kings were brandished, they sent a black flash of light that followed their paths. Before that big Earth King Bear could even react to it, its massive body fell onto the ground in a thud. He might not have even known what had happened to him even after he died. From the very beginning, Lin Fan had already wanted to have all of these magical beasts killed. However, after thinking through, he thought that it would be better to keep them still. Giving the Moon Shadow mainland a huge gift was not that bad of an option either. When the disciples on the top of the wall caught sight of this scene, they were just thoroughly astounded. They were already petrified at the start by the sight of those black steel mounts. Those magical beasts possessed an extraordinary strength, such that even they themselves were not able to defend against the latter at all. But, to think that those magical beasts would be rendered so helpless in the hands of these black steel mounts as well. So strong, Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect is truly a character of the legends. To think that that gigantic army of magical beasts would not even have a single chance to fight back against him at all. Lin Fan was just standing in the void while watching everything idly. Those Black Heavens demon kings were truly pretty decent. Wherever they passed by, everything was just mowed down. While that gigantic army of magical beasts had a large number of troops, they were absolutely no match for the Black Heavens demon king army at all. A ball of demonic chi rushed up into the air just like dark clouds that were rumbling up in the void. Thereafter, just like overcast clouds that were exploding with thunder, they burst out with a power toward that magical beast's army. That formidable power whacked down that gigantic magical beast's army right away. 10,000 Black Heavens demon kings were just marching forth majestically, mowing down anything that stood in their way. The torrential demonic chi was boiling endlessly, such that those magical beasts fainted over before they were even able to get close to the Black Heavens demon kings. Eventually, the Black Heavens demon kings transformed back into a flag, and with a single swoosh, flew back right into Lin Fan's hands. Lin Fan nodded his head in satisfaction. This was swift indeed. Not only that, the strength of those Black Heavens demon kings were pretty strong, they had not let him down at all. Witnessing that, all of those disciples up on the walls erupted into cheers. They had not expected that this battle would actually be so easy. They did not even have a single casualty before all those magical beasts of the Moon Shadow mainland were completely overwhelmed. Haha, Lin Fan looked over at those magical beasts and let out a grin. He then flung his arm out, causing the power of Bigra to burst forth right away. There was a legendary weapon that had followed him for his entire life now, and had laid down all sorts of tremendous deeds and credits for his reign. However, now that he was rarely using it these days, Lin Fan felt as though he was doing his power of Bigra a huge misdeed. Therefore, this was now the time for him to make it up to his power of Bigra properly. The spirit of Bigra was extremely exuberant right now. After laying in the backlines for such a long time, he was finally going to have a chance to strut his stuff once more. This was truly an amazing feeling. Whole of the power of Bigra slowly seeped their way into the bodies of those magical beasts. As long as a being were to be taken over by it, there was no way they could possibly endure its effects. Lin Fan's hands took on a claw-like grip as he controlled the entire gigantic army of magical beasts in his palms, then flew over to the distance. This must be where the base camp of the gigantic army of magical beasts lay. Since they loved invading so much, Lin Fan was just going to give them one hell of a huge gift then. He came as quickly as he left. Those disciples standing guard here had barely taken a good look at their idol before he had left the place. This had them feeling rather helpless. Magical Beast's army, how's the battle going? The devouring heavens dragon python was the strongest magical beast under the command of the magical beast's master god, having a cultivation state of an immortal king. But of course, he was nothing more than an ordinary immortal king. However, he was the strongest amongst the magical beasts other than the magical beast's master god. Right now, the devouring heavens dragon python had taken on a humanoid shape, with the body of a snake and the head of a dragon. Just as those magical beasts under him were ready to report to his question, a commotion broke outside all of a sudden. Many magical beasts rushed out immediately to take a look. There was a huge sandstorm raging in the distance as the magical beasts within roared furiously. The devouring heavens dragon python let out a terrifying smile. Seems like the battle must have ended by now. They must be returning in triumph. A few magical beasts headed over to welcome the return of this great army. Lord Big Earth King Bear, how were those indigenous beings? As for these magical beasts, those indigenous beings must have definitely been beaten down. But all of a sudden, a gigantic hand bolted out and grabbed one of those magical beasts within it. Lord Big Earth King Bear, what are you trying to do? That magical beast was suddenly discovering that the eyes of the Lord Big Earth King Bear were bloodshot and filled with a trace of berserk rage. The heart of this magical beast skipped furiously, feeling as though something bad was about to happen real soon. Looking at the magical beast before him, the Big Earth King Bear let out a lustful smirk before pinning it down beneath him. Ah, a tragic wail that was miserable beyond anything else screamed forth, sending shivers down everyone's spines. When the devouring heavens dragon python caught sight of that, he felt his heart clench up. Just what in the world is going on? But by that moment, all of those magical beasts that were overtaken by the power of Bigra had gone entirely deranged. Facing these magical beasts, the only thing on their minds was to give a good vent to their endless frustrations. No-vel-p in .c Om. Chapter 11:17 The Best Position. Chapter 11:17 The Best Position. Just what in the world is going on with you guys? One after another, those magical beasts howled out miserably. However, those cries were drowned soon after and replaced with a series of horrific yells. The brows of the devouring heavens dragon python furrowed as his eyes shone out with an endless fury. Damn it, just what in the world was going on here? What did they experience for them to turn as such? One of those magical beasts pounced out on the devouring heavens dragon python. Choking him by the throat, the devouring heavens dragon python realized that the eyes of the other party were filled with a deranged, crazed look. It was as though something was possessing him. His hand lit up with a burst of flames, incinerating that magical beast into ashes. Ha ha ha, I'm fucking laughing to death. Lin Fan stood in the void and burst out in laughter. This scene right now was simply way too amusing. The devouring heavens dragon python raised his head and glared up at the void, barking out, "Who in the world are you?" By now, he had finally understood that this entire situation must have been created by that indigenous being. Otherwise, there was no reason why the magical beasts would act in this way. For the beings of the Moon Shadow mainland to invade the Endless mainland, they had already drafted up a full attack plan. And, if that didn't work, they would just have to crush the enemy with overwhelming numbers then. There were countless magical beasts in the Moon Shadow mainland, so many that it was truly immeasurable. Just these magical beasts here alone amounted to less than a single drop in an ocean worth of their actual numbers. However, as the #1 magical beast under the command of the magical beast master god, how could he possibly allow himself to be defeated as such? Lin Fan of the Heaven and Earth sect. You guys from the Moon Shadow mainland have really planned out for your interests through and through for this invasion of our endless mainland, But in my eyes, there's no way that you guys are going to succeed. Lin Fan chuckled out. Right now, fights were breaking out all over the mainland. It was evident that the Moon Shadow mainland did not intend to gather their forces and strike out in a single direction. While Lin Fan might not know what the situation was like in the other places right now, the conclusion for this place could be determined. This was going to be a complete wipeout. There were 72 master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland. After 2 of them had been slain by Lin Fan, there were 70 of them left. However, even these 70 were not to be underestimated. Every single master god had their own cult of followers. The strength of these followers was extremely formidable. Some were fanatics, in fact. If the disciples of the endless mainland wanted to fight against them, they might truly not be a match for them. HMPH. Insolent, just because of someone like you. Watch how I'm going to devour you. The devouring heavens dragon python howled out, his eyes burning with an endless wrath. He felt that this indigenous being before him was simply being way too audacious. Lin Fan's brows rose up as he looked down with contempt. Hue, to think that the weakest of all immortal king states would dare to spout out such bold and brazen words. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself? Black Heaven's Demon King army, rush and kill them. Lin Fan did not say anything more as a single flag appeared in his hands instantly, tossing it out at the devouring heavens dragon python. In midair, the flag emitted an extremely thick black mist which then sent forth 10,000 Black Heaven's Demon Kings slaying everyone right away. They brought with them a tremendous might just like cracking thunder. Kill. Their adrenaline rush burst forth as their bright flash ripped the entire world asunder. The face of the devouring heavens dragon python changed. He could feel an extremely incredible pressure pushing down on him. To think that the power being emitted forth by this flag would actually give him this much pressure. Devouring heavens. The devouring heavens dragon python screamed out. Spreading his mouth wide open, he attempted to devour the black mist of the steel mounts. But in the eyes of Lin Fan, that fellow was really just looking to die. The long spears in the hands of the Black Heavens Demon Kings shot out with an extremely sharp glow of light that sliced everything. Shing! A black light flashed past, and the devouring heavens dragon python's expression turned entirely aghast as though he was filled in disbelief. How could this be? Shred! The Black Heavens Demon King army just stampeded their way through, appearing behind the back of the devouring heavens dragon python before turning around. A fresh drop of blood was dripping down from every single spear of those Black Heavens Demon Kings. This was all the blood of the devouring heavens dragon python. Thud! The devouring heavens dragon python lowered his head toward his body before splitting apart. He then grimaced his face and faced Lin Fan. How could this be? How could this be? Looking at the devouring heavens dragon python, Lin Fan could only shake his head helplessly. You're just simply far too weak. Bam! With that, the devouring heavens dragon python exploded, his body parts splattering out everywhere. Ding! Congratulations on killing devouring heavens dragon python. Ding! Experience points plus. The cultivation state of this devouring heavens dragon python was rather decent. After all, he was still an immortal king state being no matter what. However, he could only be considered as one of the weakest among the immortal kings. As for Lin Fan, what he wanted to do right now was to have more immortal kings killed. Only immortal kings could provide him with the large amount of experience points he required. Looking at those crazed magical beasts down below, the scene was found to be absolutely unbearable to watch. Violent. This was way too violent. It was an entirely inhumane scene right here. All of those magical beasts that were infected with the power of Bigra seemed as though they were in a trance. Nothing could describe them other than horrifying. At that moment, a heaven-encompassing palm appeared, spreading out a boundless might. The entire sky was blanketed by this single gigantic palm of Lin Fan. He wanted to just slap down and have all of them FCKED to death. But right at that moment, a tremendous power shot out from within the endless void. If you dare lay your hands on them and kill them, I'll have you dead. That voice was absolutely terrifying to hear, sounding as though it was filled with an infinite amount of rage. Lin Fan's brows twitched. How could he possibly care about such words? Smirking out, he pushed his palm down right away. Peok! The entire ground quaked as those magical beasts wailed out for a split second. After all, they were being exterminated just when they were at the pinnacle of pleasure in their lives. Ding! Ding! The notifications from the system rang out ceaselessly. The experience points from these measly little magical beasts were not something that Lin Fan could be bothered with at all, as he ignored them all entirely. As for that figure in the void, it was just completely incensed. Indigenous being, you are just looking to die. Hue hue, Lin Fan laughed out in disdain before standing up in the void and waiting patiently. However, even after waiting for a long time, the other party was still not bloody appearing at all. This was something that made him pretty peeved. So, are you coming down or what? If you're not going to come at me, I'm going to be leaving, alright. Who in the world has the time to waste it here with you? Lin Fan yelled out. He naturally knew that the other party must be a master god. But, wasn't the time spent here getting pretty long now? If the other party was still not going to show his face, how long more did he want Lin Fan to have to wait for? B*****, a mighty voice boomed out of the vortex up in the void. Getting closer and closer, it seemed as though the owner of the voice was about to arrive soon. Looking at the situation before him, Lin Fan took out the 9-5 legendary brick before heading over to the area closer to the vortex. Later on, the other party would definitely come out of this vortex. Yours truly would then hold on to this brick and wait for the rabbit to come bang its head on the tree. As long as this FCKER dared to show his face, yours truly would slam down with his brick. This was an absolutely safe plan. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. After standing left and right, Lin Fan finally chose a position where he felt the most confident in. Coughing out gently, the brick was all prepped up in Lin Fan's hand, he just had to wait for the other party to appear now. The power emanating out of the vortex was getting stronger by the moment. Evidently, this master god must have been rushing over from a distant place and was truly about to arrive soon. Pishu, the void trembled out slightly. The moment he noticed the feedback from the void, Lin Fan leapt up furiously. Go F***ck off for yours truly. Without saying anything more than that, Lin Fan slammed down with the brick in his hand. Piok, a figure appeared between the heaven and earth. Lin Fan had timed it perfectly and even struck the target right on the mark. I've done it, Lin Fan roared out in laughter as he reared his head up into the void and laughed out. Haha, what the FCK do you even amount to? Wanting to act so brazenly in front of yours truly? How many lives do you think you have? However, that happiness did not last long as a single voice sounded out within his ears. Damned indigenous being, you are simply way too audacious. Lin Fan was stumped, somewhat in disbelief. How could this be? Yours truly had clearly hit the target right on the mark. But how the FCK was this fella totally alright? But when Lin Fan took a closer look at the target he had struck, the only thing that appeared on his face was nothing but the blank expression of an utter and complete defeat. Chapter 11:18 Join Our Forces. Chapter 11:18 Join Our Forces. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. Your mother jump, bloody hell, you skanky weasel. Lin Fan had admitted defeat. He truly couldn't do anything but admit defeat. To think that this fella would have 9 heads. While one of the heads was slumped down and had descended into a state of endless slumber, the other 8 heads remained ever so malevolent. The magical beast master god was enraged at this moment. He had just come out when he was struck by the other party's sneak attack. At the same time, to think that one of his head would be entirely unconscious. Indigenous being, what have you done? He was the magical beast master god, one of the 72 master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland. He was also one of the strongest master gods, with an extremely formidable strength that was unlike any other, wielding control over the countless magical beasts in the Moon Shadow mainland. He was sitting firmly in the Moon Shadow mainland when he felt the life force mark he had left in his underling, the devouring heavens dragon python, disappear all of a sudden. He immediately knew that the latter must have met with some danger, and had therefore rushed over here. But, to think that this indigenous being would have dared to make his move despite that. Oh, I didn't really do anything much. Just a gentle slap, that's all. But honestly, you're quite the hideous sh**t, aren't you? Magical beast master god, 9 heads, each with a different face. Hell, even the shade of your skin tone is different. I wonder how you can possibly endure living life like that. Lin Fan remarked in helplessness. The strength of this magical beast master god was indeed really strong, similar to the war master god. Both of them were evidently top-tiered existences amongst the master gods. Hence, being able to slap a single one of his heads unconscious must have evidently been a huge impact for him. If Lin Fan were to strike out now, he should have quite a bit of confidence in suppressing the other party. Courting death, the magical beast master god glared at Lin Fan frostily, his eyes shining with coldness. A boundless might of the Master Gods then burst forth from the void, shattering it apart. This was the power of the Master Gods. They could have the other party killed with just a single thought. Now that there was only the magical beast Master God alone, Lin Fan wasn't fazed in the slightest bit as he struck back in retaliation. While he might not dare to claim that he had the greatest confidence in dueling with a top-tiered immortal king, Lin Fan knew that it wasn't going to be easy for these top-tiered immortal kings to want to have him killed either. Doomsday's Descent. Hurling out his fist, Lin Fan raised the power of Doomsday along with it. As he took a step forward, the part of the world around him crumbled down as that power of decay assaulted relentlessly, pushing out toward the magical beast Master God. However, for the magical beast Master God, an attack of this level was not something that he would fear. One of his heads trembled out slightly, sending forth a cyclone that ripped everything apart. When that force collided with the power of decay, even the entire heaven and earth quaked in the face of it. While the magical beast Master God had control over all the magical beasts of the Moon Shadow mainland, it also meant that he was capable of casting every single ability that those magical beasts had. Lightning, fire, ice, earth, space, etc. All of those powers were sent exploding out. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. The entire void around them began to distort and collapse. This was the clash between mighty powers. With immortal king state beings on both sides, when Lin Fan and the magical beast Master God struck out, the amount of force produced was supernatural. Shattering the void apart was something as easy as the flick of a finger for them. Lin Fan's brows were knitted right now. While time was passing by the moments and seconds, he realized that he wasn't exactly getting an edge over the other party. If he were to allow that head of the magical beast Master God to awaken, that would be an entirely FCKED up situation for him by then. Damned indigenous being, your power is already determined by your Master God here. Once that head of power of your Master God awakens, the only path awaiting you shall be death. The magical beast Master God shouted out. He was feeling a little restricted in terms of his powers right now. But, he could clearly understand that this indigenous being before him was definitely unable to match his powers at their peak. Lin Fan narrowed his gaze as his mind started whirling. The strength of this magical beast Master God was extremely strong indeed, and right now, there was truly no clear victor between either of them in the fight. It was just that Lin Fan did not know if his moves would have any effect on this fella. He slapped his palms together, and his hands were shrouded in a ball of light when he pulled them apart. His body flashed out nimbly as he appeared in the void above the magical beast Master God instantly, slamming toward the head of the latter. Insignificant tricks. Lin Fan was trying his best to get closer to the magical beast Master God. However, that guy did not give him any chance at all, forcing him to retreat right away. Magical beast Master God, do you have the guts to fight me in melee combat? Lin Fan asked. The magical beast Master God glared at Lin Fan, striking out immediately without saying anything more. Toward an indigenous being as such, he didn't want to say even a single word more. Holy FCK, Lin Fan found himself being knocked back rapidly. Gathering a swordwill in his hands, he sliced out at the magical beast Master God. Indigenous being, your strength is totally pathetic. Melee combat, I'll grant you your wish then. At that moment, the magical beast Master God burst out laughing. That slumped head of his bolted awake all of a sudden as a horrifying aura was exuded out of those terrifying eyes. The term, head of power, represented the fact that it was where the power of the magical beast Master God was contained. Lin Fan's lips curled into a smirk. Melee combat, that was something that yours truly loved the most. Pishu, the magical beast Master God changed its fighting tactics instantly, and with a single flash of his body, his speed reached its peak. Indigenous being, since you wish to fight in melee combat, your Master God shall give you a melee combat. But, I'm afraid you may have not known that melee combat is actually the strongest suit of your Master God. At the start, when that head of power of the magical beast Master God was knocked unconscious by Lin Fan, it naturally meant that his strength had taken a huge dip. However, now that it had recovered, the magical beast Master God naturally wanted to make use of his fullest strength and take down this indigenous being thoroughly. As he punched out with a single fist, the entire void exploded. This was an absolute strength. The magical beast Master God had lived for a long time now, and his strength was far from normal. Even though that punch had not made its way to Lin Fan's face just yet, the resultant astral wind was already starting to rip his body from the impact. A little interesting. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. This magical beast Master God was truly extraordinary. Every single move he made caused thunderous booms to resound. In terms of pure strength, that guy was even stronger than Lin Fan, however, the latter still wasn't fazed. Herg. Roaring out, Lin Fan shone with a bright golden light and replied with a punch as well. The void were shattering constantly, causing a gigantic tornado to form. This was the result of two utmost powerful forces colliding against one another. Bam! Indigenous being, you can go to hell. The magical beast master god yelled out as his power rose significantly, sending Lin Fan flying with his punch. Lin Fan's expression turned pale. He had evidently underestimated the strength of this magical beast master god. The powers within his body rumbled furiously, the latter's strength had clearly rattled the state of his body. Stamping down with his feet, he channeled a large part of that power downward, causing the entire ground to split apart. That tremendous amount of power created a gigantic pit 10,000 miles in radius immediately. This was the power of an immortal king. If it were an immortal lord or even a lower-leveled immortal king, their bodies might have broken apart entirely just under the might of this punch. That was because there was no way they could possibly endure this terrifying amount of power. Lin Fan's knee buckled out slightly for a moment before he pushed himself up once more, looking at the magical beast master god up in the void. All of this was truly out of his expectations. The strength of the magical beast master god was clearly far beyond Lin Fan's calculations. Twisting heaven and earth wasn't going to be that easy to be used here. True Origin's crushing kick, that was a little difficult as well. It was needless to even talk about the power of Bigra right now. A powerful being of this level might most probably be able to sense out even the slightest changes within the heaven and earth. But still, he could probably give it a shot nonetheless. After all, it might even work. Indigenous being, how was that? What other capabilities do you have? The magical beast master god looked at Lin Fan with a face full of contempt. Lin Fan chuckled out and started to emit his power of Bigra secretly. But all of a sudden, a bright beam of Buddhist light shot out from behind him. Danger! Lin Fan dodged in a flash, barely avoiding that attack. Boundless future Buddha Lord, you are way too despicable, aren't you? Lin Fan glared right into the void. That power from earlier on was clearly from the boundless future Buddha Lord. To think that that guy would dare to try to backstab him again. He knew that the reason why the boundless future Buddha Lord would not dare to fight him face to face was because the other party knew that he had that mysterious soap of his. That was something that the boundless future Buddha Lord did not have confidence in handling, which was why he chose to try and do Lin Fan in stealthily. Amitabha, the Buddhist chant sounded out across the entire world as the boundless future Buddha Lord made his appearance. But to Lin Fan's astonishment, he was not the only one. There were a full 10 other master gods that appeared right beside the boundless future Buddha Lord. Your Buddha Lord here was just informing these fellow master gods about the danger that you pose, benefactor. Therefore, we have all prepared to join our forces to take you down, benefactor. Lin Fan, Chapter 1119 Come if you dare to. Chapter 1119, Come if you dare to. Translator, Lam_editor, Hitesh_. 10 master gods, coupled with the magical beast master god, that made it 11 of them. Not only that, there was the boundless future Buddha Lord, whose level of craftiness was on par with Lin Fan, that was watching by the sidelines covetously. At that moment, Lin Fan felt an impossibly immense pressure on himself. The void quivered as 10 of those master gods appeared. Right away, the entire heaven and earth was blanketed over by their god powers. All of their varying god powers spread out slowly and continuously across the sky. Furthermore, the amount of power being exuded at this instant was definitely not something to be trifled with. Even if it were an immortal king, there was a chance he could be blown up instantaneously as well. While Lin Fan might not know who these 10 master gods were, the 10 of them definitely knew who he was. For these 10 master gods, this indigenous being had been really troublesome recently, killing many of their people. That was something absolutely intolerable for these master gods. To them, those people represented faith that they could make use of. If someone would dare to sever that faith, that person would definitely be an enemy of theirs. Amitabha, benefactor, do you still have anything you wish to say? Lay down your sins and leave with us. The boundless future Buddha Lord looked over at Lin Fan calmly. That dignified face of his was gleaming with a bright, compassionate expression. If any ordinary person were to bump into him, they might even take him for some revered monk of the Buddhist clan who was here to purify the entire world. Right now, Lin Fan felt drops of sweat on his forehead. The situation was truly not that great right now. He felt as though he was being targeted so badly right now. It was as though they did not mind if they lost the battle as a group entirely, as long as Lin Fan was killed. The magical beast master god looked over at the many other master gods. This indigenous being is mine. Don't interfere. The fact that Lin Fan had killed many of the magical beast master god's people had him extremely infuriated from the start. He was going to use the fresh blood of this indigenous being here to wash away the shame that he had endured. The boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up, "Magical beast master god, this man is extremely crafty. In order to prevent any accidents from happening, it is imperative that we strike at him together and have him killed." Lin Fan blew up right away as he pointed out at the boundless future Buddha Lord. "What the FCK are you saying? I'm crafty? FCKU, you're way craftier than I am. Please, you were the one who had FCKED the Radiant Master God over to death. No, vel, b, in .c, ohm." The boundless future Buddha Lord had wanted to say something when the entire place fell deathly silent all of a sudden. All 11 of those master gods turned their gazes at the boundless future Buddha Lord in a flush. They knew of the death of the Radiant Master God, and at the same time, they also knew that he was killed by this indigenous being here. But now that this indigenous being was spilling out the beans about that matter, this was something that had the 11 master gods feeling misgivings over it. The face of the boundless future Buddha Lord was alarmed as he felt a flame of rage burning up in his heart right away. He then scolded out in wrath, "Don't come and accuse me with your venomous slander. You were the one who had the Radiant Master God killed. Fellow Master Gods, please don't let this person sow these seeds of discord amongst us. That person is well known throughout the entire endless mainland for being wily. God knows how many people have been scammed to death by him. Therefore, it is without a doubt that the Radiant Master God was also scammed to death by him." Lin Fan smiled out indifferently. If he did not try to scam his way out of this situation, his only outcome after being gangbanged by these 11 Master Gods was death. And not only that, his death would definitely be extremely miserable, without any single bit of chance at fighting back. HMPH, you say that I'm venomously slandering you right now. You were the one who came at me together with the Radiant Master God to try and kill me. When you discovered that the situation wasn't right, you backstabbed the Radiant Master God, and now you're accusing me of being the wily one. Lin Fan then turned his sights toward the rest of those Master Gods. All of you should know that the reason why this bald monk is working together with you guys is definitely not out of goodwill. I was the one who had witnessed it personally. At that final critical moment, he pushed the Radiant Master God toward danger and escaped himself. The Space Master God frowned out and turned around to look at the boundless future Buddha Lord. "Boundless future Buddha Lord, I suppose you ought to give us an explanation for this matter, Could it truly have been as this indigenous being is saying right now?" The boundless future Buddha Lord was entirely infuriated. "Space Master God, do you really think that it is possible? This person here is so weak. What capabilities does he have to have your Buddha Lord here fear him?" The other Master Gods nodded their head, feeling that there was absolutely nothing wrong with what the boundless future Buddha Lord was saying. The strength of this indigenous being before them did not seem like he was much stronger than the boundless future Buddha Lord. Clearly, he should not have what it took to force the boundless future Buddha Lord into a spot. Right then, the Space Master God turned around to Lin Fan. "What proof do you have?" Lin Fan scoffed out, "Proof? All you need is to get the War Master God to come and verify what I just said." After the boundless future Buddha Lord escaped, he went to look for the War Master God for help. If the boundless future Buddha Lord were not present on the scene, how could he possibly know about what happened between the Radiant Master God and me? The boundless future Buddha Lord retorted, "Everyone, please don't believe in the one-sided story of this lad here. Right now, the War Master God is in the midst of a battle. Therefore, it's definitely impossible for him to rush over from where he is right now. This lad must definitely be trying to delay so that he can come up with a plan to escape. If all of you guys believe in your Buddha Lord, let us strike out together and have this lad crushed for real." At that moment, all 11 Master Gods exchanged glances before nodding eventually. Even though they did not believe in the boundless future Buddha Lord, compared to this indigenous being before them, he was certainly still more trustworthy no matter what. "Lad, since you do not wish to lay down your sins, you can go all the way to Avachi then." The boundless future Buddha Lord roared out as he shot forth with a bright flash of Buddha light, covering the entire sky with his palms. But all of a sudden, when the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of the item before his eyes, his heart clenched up as he retracted that palm right away. Hooey, come at me if you've got the guts." Standing there, the white piece of soap in Lin Fan's hand was ever so eye-catching. Throwing it up and catching it, up and down. The aura that was being given off by the soap right now caused the boundless future Buddha Lord to hesitate. Lin Fan mumbled out to himself, "You should know very well what this is." If you dare to take another step forward, whether you get out alive or dead is going to be something difficult to determine. He then cast his sight over at the rest of the 11 Master Gods. Fellow Master Gods here, you guys ought to be careful as well. The boundless future Buddha Lord knows what this item in my hand is. But, has he ever mentioned it to you guys? All the 11 Master Gods cast their gazes at the boundless future Buddha Lord in a flush once again. The strength of this indigenous being was clearly not strong, and yet, the actions of the boundless future Buddha Lord were extremely unusual. It was as though he was being wary about something. Just what was it that the other party was wielding in his hand? Why had they not heard the boundless future Buddha Lord mentioning it even once? Right now, Lin Fan felt the need to hold himself firm. This was one hell of a FCKED up situation. There were 12 immortal king state beings surrounding him at this moment. Not only that, there were some Master Gods that were on the same level as the boundless future Buddha Lord. If he were to strike out at them, there was no doubt that the only outcome awaiting him was death. Not only that, he could not even make use of the soap. If he did use it, he would be in for a tragedy. The most he could kill would be 2 of them. However, there were a full 12 of them here right now. Besides, who was to say whether or not he would be successful in killing those 2 even? Lin Fan heaved in a deep breath of air as he sensed the heaven and earth. The space around this entire place had been sealed up by someone. There was absolutely no way of escaping for him. Boundless future Buddha Lord, you know very well what this item that I'm holding in my hands is. If you've got the balls, come up ahead alone and prove it to the rest of the Master Gods. Do you dare to? The boundless future Buddha Lord yelled out, what do I not dare? Since you dare to, come on then. Lin Fan rebutted. The boundless future Buddha Lord was stunned, undecided over what to do at this moment. All the surrounding Master Gods were starting to feel misgivings toward the entire situation as well. Lin Fan's lips curled into a grin. Let me tell you guys then. The name of this treasure is called soap. It has a heaven-revolting ability. No matter how profound your cultivation state is, as long as you are struck by this soap, you will definitely be controlled by it. The very reason why the boundless future Buddha Lord does not dare to come forth is because of the horrifying nature of this item. If you guys don't believe in me, you can see for yourself whether or not the boundless future Buddha Lord would dare to come and face me. After he was done saying that, Lin Fan hurriedly crafted something that looked the exact same as the soap. Whether or not he could get out of this alive would all have to depend on the situation later on then. Chapter 1120 Only realizing after chasing for such a long time. Chapter 1120 Only realizing after chasing for such a long time. Translator. Lam_editor, Hitesh_. After the 11 Master Gods heard that, their spirits shuddered in disbelief. How could there possibly exist such a treasure between the heaven and earth? While their hearts were filled with disbelief, when they looked at the way the boundless future Buddha Lord was behaving right now, they could not help but somewhat believe in it. And honestly, the boundless future Buddha Lord truly did not dare to do it. He had witnessed the might of the soap twice now, and found it to be totally incomprehensible. While he refused to believe that there could be something so heaven-revolting that existed in the world, he did not dare to take a gamble on that. If he were to lose that gamble, he would definitely be killed here. And now that the 11 Master Gods here were not budging a single inch, the boundless future Buddha Lord was truly experiencing a dilemma. Everyone, even though that item may be heaven-defying, the requirements for him to use it are extremely strict. How about we all join forces and strike together to have that lad killed? The boundless future Buddha Lord rallied out. If they were to strike out together, there was a huge chance of them succeeding. And even if anything were to happen, he would definitely be the first to make a run for it. None of the Master Gods replied. They were no fools either. How could they possibly fall for the trick of the boundless future Buddha Lord? The invasion of the endless mainland had already cost them 2 Master Gods so far. For them, that was an immensely huge loss. At the same time, cooperating with this boundless future Buddha Lord was as good as plotting together with a tiger. Therefore, there was no way they were going to act as meat shields for the latter. Right now, the one thing that Lin Fan was the most afraid of was for all of those Master Gods to strike at him together. In that case, even if he had the soap, that would be absolutely useless. But for the current moment, he knew that he still had to hold his ground firm. Boundless future Buddha Lord, you are indeed crafty and sneaky. You know that I have many treasures with me, and that's why you're thinking of letting those Master Gods die in your place so that you can just sit back and collect the rewards, right? Even though they have not seen through you, yours truly is just reading you like an open book. Lin Fan chuckled out coldly, that expression of his not seeming as though he was joking. When it came to acting skills, if Lin Fan dared to proclaim being the number 2 in the world, there would be no one who could dare to proclaim they were the number 1. Naturally, there was no way the boundless future Buddha Lord could tell how many soaps he had. That was the biggest shot at life that he had right now. Even though the heaven and earth were sealed, they could not hold off someone like him. But of course, the prerequisite was that these folks must not come and stand in his way first. All of a sudden, the boundless future Buddha Lord found himself caught in a total loss for words. This lad was just trying to push him all the way. That lad clearly knew that if he did not make a move first, all of those other master gods would definitely stand by idly as well. Right now, the boundless future Buddha Lord was truly flustered. The space master god took a slight step backward. Boundless future Buddha Lord, are you trying to make use of us? The boundless future Buddha Lord was burning with rage in his heart. Space master god, both of us have known one another for several 100,000 years now. Do you think that I would lie to you? Some of the other master gods chimed in right away. HMPH, that's hard to determine. Looking at the current situation, Lin Fan seized an opportunity. Oh, you poor little D**ck heads of my children, come and take the soap of your daddy. At that moment, Lin Fan went berserk. Sweeping his robes out, tens of soaps flew out and danced in the sky. The moment the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of those white soap, his heart skipped a beat. Without even hesitating once, he bolted right into the void and went into hiding. As for the other master gods, they were stunned for a moment. Thereafter, they quickly hid into the void just as the boundless future Buddha Lord did. Time to run. Lin Fan did not dare to think twice as he bolted off into a sprint right away. The barriers in the voids were smashed apart by a single punch of his as he then went into stealth mode and sped off into the distance. We were tricked, the boundless future Buddha Lord roared out in a furious rage. He had been on his guard for the entire time. But all of a sudden, he realized that there was no change in those soaps at all. And not only that, that lad had even vanished in front of their faces. Some of the other master gods furrowed their brows from within the void, their hearts were burning with an endless fury as well. Chase, we must absolutely not let that lad escape. Pishu, the 12 immortal kings bolted after Lin Fan immediately. This was especially the case for the boundless future Buddha Lord. No matter what, he was going to have that lad slain. Right now, he had finally understood that there was definitely a restriction of sorts for the soap. If there weren't, that lad would not have needed to run at all. And with these 11 master gods around, if they were to all strike out together, they would definitely be able to have that lad killed. Lin Fan streaked through the void while cussing out. That bloody boundless future Buddha Lord was too damned accursed. To think that he would keep coming after him in groups like that, trying to kill him at the slightest opportunity. Once he was to raise his strength up in the future, the first one he would FCK over would definitely be that guy. FC King Hell. This was way too FCKED up a situation. Dimensional shift. The god powers of the Space Master God burst forth right away, altering the space right ahead of Lin Fan. All of a sudden, it turned into layers one after another just like mirrors, and blocked out Lin Fan's path of escape entirely. But, how could Lin Fan dare to linger at all? He turned around to change directions immediately. This time around, it was really one hell of a Mother Sea King cluster *CK to be hunted down by 12 immortal kings. Don't run, you'll never be able to escape. The body of the boundless future Buddha Lord descended as he chased hot in pursuit. Even though Lin Fan had gone into stealth mode, he would reveal his entire aura with even a single budge. For these immortal kings, there was completely no need for them to see everything with their physical sight, they could tell where he was just by sensing any changes in the aura of the vicinity. Bald monk, you had better FC King wait and see. Lin Fan cussed out angrily. Sweeping his robes, he released the power of Bigra right away. No matter whether or not this would work, he would have to give it a shot as they scattered behind Lin Fan. When the boundless future Buddha Lord rushed into that power of Bigra, his brows furrowed right away. Everyone, watch out, there's something wrong with this scent. For the boundless future Buddha Lord, even if this lad before him were to just piss a single puddle of pee, that would definitely be something suspicious. Now that he was suddenly sensing this invisible and odorless power of Bigra, he naturally put on his guard. The Buddhist light within his body shot out and protected his body right away, so that nothing could penetrate through it and infiltrate his body. Mother *CKER. What a crafty fella. Lin Fan was utterly speechless right now. He had not expected that this boundless future Buddha Lord would actually be so careful that he could even sense something like this. But to his greatest delight, he discovered that there was one master god out of the 11 who had been infected by it. Instantly, the power of Bigra was exploding out within the body of that master god. Roar! A beast-like roar sounded out across the entire heaven and earth. The master god who was invaded by the power of Bigra was going entirely berserk right at this moment. That was something that shocked the other master gods present. However, to Lin Fan's disappointment, the master god that was infected was one with an extremely weak strength. That was the main reason why he had a weaker resistance toward the power of Bigra as well. As for the other master gods, they were completely unaffected entirely. They suppressed that crazed master god instantly. But, that was something good as well, as it had bought him quite a bit of time at least. Lad, hold on there. The boundless future Buddha Lord barked out. This lad was running way too quickly. Even though he was chasing right behind that lad, for a moment or so, there was truly nothing he could do about him at all. Lin Fan naturally ignored him. The place he was headed for right now was the Heaven and Earth sect. It was only by running in that direction that he would be able to stand some chance. The boundless future Buddha Lord was totally incensed by now. While howling out, his entire body's Buddhist light shone across the entire area as though it was incinerating life itself. The entire world was filled with a boundless Buddhist voice immediately, such that even the heaven and earth were undergoing some changes due to it. It turned into a Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss. When Lin Fan caught sight of how everything before his face was changing right now, he jerked to a stop. He could see a gigantic Buddha seated on a lotus seat right up ahead. N-O-V-E in.C Om. Let's see where else you can run. The Buddha spoke out, blocking Lin Fan's escape path entirely. FCK me. Lin Fan was almost exploding at this moment. He then swerved around and caught sight of the boundless future Buddha Lord. That fellow was still hot on his tails, bent on leaving him with no way out of this at all. However, at that moment, Lin Fan chuckled out. The boundless future Buddha Lord frowned, not knowing what that lad was laughing about. But all of a sudden, he came to a realization. After chasing for such a long time, it suddenly seemed like he was the only one left here now.